Thank you for that reminder. Perfect. It is 6 p.m. Before I call the meeting to order, does the general manager have any housekeeping items that he'd like to share?
Thank you, President Akbari. Yes. Firstly, can everybody hear me? Great. Good evening. On behalf of the ACWD Board of Directors, I would like to welcome the public's participation in this board meeting. My name is Robert Shaver. I serve as the district's general manager, and members of the public may participate either by using the Zoom application or by telephone. And if you're participating by Zoom, generally we ask that all participants mute their microphones unless speaking. You may also be placed on mute by the district secretary, and the district secretary will unmute participants at the appropriate times when the board is receiving public comments. In Zoom, you will be able to view presentation materials as they are presented to the board, and at any time you may submit a question or raise your hand in the Zoom app, and you will be called upon at the appropriate time. If you're participating by telephone, again, we ask that you place your phone on mute, and you may download the presentation slides from the district's website, and that's at www.acwd.org, and you can follow along that way. And you will also be given an opportunity to provide comments to the board. We do record our Zoom meetings, and they will be made accessible to the public for future viewing. The board will be working through a very full agenda this evening, and we will have 3 closed session items that will be covered near the end of the meeting. While the board convenes privately in closed session, members of the public may remain logged into Zoom or stay on the phone, and you'll be informed of any board reports or announcements once the closed sessions are concluded. Again, thank you all for attending. And that is the housekeeping item.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Shaver. With that, let us jump into this packed agenda that we have tonight. And let's start with roll call, please.
Sure. Directors Weed.
Here.
Gunther.
Here.
Huang.
Here.
Sethi.
Here.
And Akbari.
Here. And Mr. Shaver, would you like to lead us in the salute to the flag tonight?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Okay, we will move on to item 3, public comments. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment on this item? Hearing none, and oh, I see a hand raised, Mr. Kelly A.
All right. Thank you. It seems to me that I've been looking at newspaper headlines lately, and Tri-Valley, the Zone 7 is urging 10% conservation. The Valley Water is made some announcements in that regards. The state of California has suddenly discovered, due to serious defects, it looks like, in their forecast model for water runoff from the Sierra, which is not easy to model, and they're proving it because their model was overestimating significantly the amount of runoff they get, and their runoff came in way short. I mean, I think they lost what, 500,000 acre feet or something of from what they expected. So that's a lot of water is missing because it evaporated somewhere. And with all that, I think that the watchword of this district should be something like a responsible water use. And responsible water use, regardless of how much water you have or we have here in ACWD, responsible is going to be staying in line with what the other agencies are doing around here. And then when that happens, or if that happens, if it's accomplished through conservation, then then ACWD is going to lose a ton of money. So ACWD is going to have to come up with a financial workaround such that you can sell less water and make more money per unit and not blow your budget, because the budget is more or less fixed and you have to replace all the pipes. So that's my take on this. And I just don't see enough of a rigorous statement that says we are going to be responsible water users, because if we're not, the political fallout will be too severe, and we're going to manage our budget such that we make more money even though we're selling less water. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a comment? Hearing none and seeing no other hands raised in the Zoom app, we will close the public comment section tonight, and we'll move on to item 4, consent calendar. Are there any members of the board who wish to add any items to the consent calendar?
Director Gunther, I'm going to have to recluse myself from item 5.11. I live within the 1,000-foot mark. Actually, my street's been closed because of the paving. So yeah, I'm gonna have to recluse from number 11. I've consistently done that.
And Director Sethi here, I would like to remove item 5.16 from the consent calendar to make some few remarks.
And Director Weed, item 5.10, I abstain for a variety of reasons, which may not apply here on this item, on this project. So it would be appropriate for me to say in keeping and abstain on 5.10.
Okay, so why don't I make the motion to add items 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, 5.7, 5.8, 5.9, 5.12, 5.13, 5.14, 5.15 to the consent calendar, please.
I'll second.
Okay, great.
Roll call, please.
Sure. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right,
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye.
And I will make the motion to move consent calendar as amended.
I'll
Second.
second.
Just to confirm, was that
Okay.
Director Gunther who seconded that?
I think there were two of us, but
Okay.
I'll go ahead. Second.
Okay, Director Gunther, thank you. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right,
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Okay, we are going to move a couple of things around in the agenda, and I'm going to skip down to item 5.23.
Could I briefly ask?
okay.
Could I briefly ask if item 5.12, the party we honored, is one of the 30 participants?
Ms. Wooding is not joining us this evening.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 5.23, taking this a little bit out of order tonight. Item 5.23, resolution honoring Robert T. Shaver upon his retirement from district service. Robert T. Shaver, also known as Bob Shaver, will be retiring after 30 years of service to the district, and his last day in the office will be July 1st, 2021. Bob joined the district on July 1st, 1991. Excuse me, lost my place. July 1st, 1991 as an engineer 2 in the project engineering division. He was promoted to engineer 3 in 1994, development services supervisor in 2000, development services manager in 2002, engineering department manager in 2003, and assistant general manager in 2010. The board of directors appointed Bob as the district's general manager on December 7th, 2014. During his tenure as project engineer, Bob led many key projects during a period of facility expansions and improvements needed to meet growth within the district. Such projects included the design and construction of the Whitfield Zone 1 booster station and the major transmission pipeline connecting the newly constructed water treatment plant number 2 to Whitfield Reservoir and other facilities. Bob also led major facility improvement projects, such as the major retrofit and upgrades to the Mission San Jose water treatment plant, and contributed to other significant projects, such as the construction of the Peralta Tyson blending facility and the Newark desal facility. As a supervisor and manager, Bob oversaw numerous projects and programs in the project engineering and development services divisions, guiding the implementation of the district's capital improvement program and extensions to the district's water distribution system to serve thousands of new district customers. As assistant general manager, Bob engaged with numerous water industry groups representing the interests of the district's customers while helping to shape programs and initiatives advancing the water industry across the Bay Area and throughout California. Internally, he developed programs focused on improving efficiencies, reducing costs, and engaging employees in workplace and process improvements, all while continuing to serve as a manager of the engineering department. Bob's appointment as general manager in 2014 came at a time when California and the district were facing an unprecedented drought, stressing the district's water supplies, operations, and finances. Through a collaborative process, Bob worked with the board, district staff, and the public to manage these challenges, resulting in improved water supply and financial resiliency against future droughts and water supply emergencies. Other challenges faced by the district under Bob's tenure as general manager included addressing threats to the district's water supplies and the onset of the COVID-19 global pandemic. Regardless of the challenge, the district continued its long history of meeting customer needs for a reliable supply of high quality water at a reasonable price. Other district accomplishments under Bob's tenure include the development of a 5-year strategic plan, organizational assessments, employee engagement efforts, a classification and compensation study, industry awards and financial reporting and technology programs, compliance with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, the development of the Water Efficiency Master Plan, and significant grant funding for important capital improvements such as water main renewals and seismic improvements, fish passage improvements in the lower Alameda Creek, and the implementation of the advanced metering infrastructure. As general manager, Bob continued to represent the interests of the district and its customers through engagement with the Association of California Water Agencies, California Urban Water Agencies, CalDesal, Bay Area Water Agencies Coalition, the Fremont Rotary Club, and other organizations. Over the course of his 30-year career, Bob has consistently performed his duties in service to the district and its customers with a high level of competence, professionalism, integrity, and dedication, and he will be greatly missed by his many friends and colleagues at the district and throughout the water industry. Thank you so much for your service, Bob. I know all the directors have thoughts that they would like to share. But before I turn it over to the directors, Bob, I thought I'd give you an opportunity if you had anything that you wanted to talk about tonight.
Thank you, President Akbari. I really appreciate that. I do have some things I'd like to say, if the board will indulge me. Firstly, I want to thank all of the directors on the board. It's been a privilege to work with such a passionate, intelligent, and well-informed board. I really appreciate you all as individuals and as professionals. I applaud you for your commitment to service to this community, especially since sometimes the hard work that you do is not as appreciated, I think, as much as it should be. And I also want to thank you for your trust in me and for your support, especially over these past 6+ years. In reflection, it's hard for me to believe that at this time 30 years ago, pretty much to this day, my wife Lauren and I were driving across the country. We were off on a new adventure to find an apartment in a city called Fremont so that I could begin working at ACWD as an engineer, and my starting day was July 1st, 1991. Obviously, this was a leap of faith. We left our home, we left our families, and our careers back on Long Island. And I am forever grateful for Lauren's support, as she made sacrifices which allowed me to chase this particular dream. At the time, there were a lot of unknowns, but I had good feelings about ACWD. I had worked for a consulting firm and another water agency, and somehow those experiences felt, frankly, a little bit hollow. And to me, ACWD felt different. As a board, you may like to know that I also interviewed with East Bay Mud, and I never heard back from them. Anyway, to say that my experience at ACWD exceeded my expectations would be grossly understated. ACWD provided me with an environment in which I could take ownership of my work and in which I thought I could flourish. I felt empowered, I felt valued, I felt supported, and I felt that I could be myself, which for me sometimes means acting a little bit like a goofball, and that was tolerated. Seriously, I've worked with so many capable mentors over the years, and I tried my best to learn from everybody. This place is loaded with talent all across the organization, up and down on the organization chart. And at 29 years old, when I started here, I didn't come here with the goal of being general manager. I just had this vague idea that I should challenge myself and learn as much as possible. And along the way, there were promotional opportunities. Sometimes I was successful, other times I wasn't. While disappointing at the time, I think for the most part, I was served just as well when I didn't get promoted as when I did. And in any event, ACWD invested in me. I attended many training sessions. I learned all I could, and I certainly hope that I turned out to be a good business case for the district, and you got an acceptable return on your investment. There is some magic in this place, and it begins with all of you as the board and as the executive staff working together. You have a great senior leadership team at ACWD, and I know you know that. And all of them have a district first mindset, even if sometimes it's inconvenient for their department. So of course, everything isn't perfect, nothing ever is, but the culture and values here are ACWD's secret sauce. And part of that secret sauce is that you all as a board consistently make excellent decisions. And I encourage you all to continue listening to each other, trust your professional staff, find common ground, and preserve the collaborative approach that I think we have now. And I assure you that staff works hard for you every day. While there remain plenty of near-term and long-term challenges, I think the district is well positioned to continue to be successful. In your new general manager, Ed Stevenson, I think you've chosen an excellent individual with high character. Nobody cares more than he does. And I'm sure the 230 plus dedicated water professionals will support him as they have supported me. In closing, on July 2nd, my new adventure begins, and it will involve traveling, home projects, community service, and some time outdoors. I do wish you as the board all the best. I also wish that for staff. And don't forget, I'm a customer too. And in the words of one of my mentors, the late Bill Blair, this is what he said during his retirement. ACWD is not the biggest water district in California, but it is the best, and it needs to stay that way. So I'll be watching, and thank you. All the best to you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. Wow. I think I want to be kind of on the latter end to share some of my thoughts. I'll open it up to the board. Are there any directors who want to share some thoughts?
I guess maybe I'll go first. John and I have been here longest, almost as long as Bob. Not quite, but close. I'm going to miss Bob dearly. You know, I hate seeing people retire. And on the other hand, I really am happy when people retire. I'm happy for them. Thank you, Bob. I'm very happy for you. I'm going to miss you very much. We will adapt. Belinda says her too. Yeah, it's going to be, it's a loss, but you've left us with some pretty darn good people. And the GM is the one that gets those people. So thank you for that. The staff is here because of you. And we owe you that thanks. I'll miss having you as GM. I'm going to miss having you here at the district. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
I guess I can go next. So a job as a general manager is a cat herder to ensure that the directors behave like we should. A translator, you're the go-between between the board director and the staff. You excel in both tasks with flying colors. In addition to that, you actually make the effort and take the opportunity to introduce some of the strength of the staff, not just the executive staff, but some online staff that doesn't always get to talk to the board and showcase their ability to us. That's greatly appreciated because that definitely helped me understand the strength and the caliber of talents that we have here at ACWD. We're not the easiest 5 directors for you. You had a very difficult time leading us through this period of transition for the water district. We also pretty much threw you out there in front of the camera as soon as you become the general manager. And you know what? You did really well. Grace under fire. You just fly through it. I want to take this opportunity not to just thank you for your efforts. I also want to say thank you to Lauren and Rachel. A job at ACWD as a general manager, it literally is a 24/7 job. You don't really have downtimes. If there's an emergency, I send your email, I get a response back, no matter how late it is. I remember some email exchanges through water main breaks. That is a lot of sacrifice on your family's part. So my appreciation to Lauren and to Rachel. Thank you, because without their support, we couldn't have the caliber of performance that you provided us. So thank you. I will miss you. I definitely see retirement as just a different stage in life. I wish you have great adventures. Hopefully not too much honeydew list. Hopefully it's a short list with a lot of travel, a lot of play. Have fun. And you know what? I'm glad that you point out you live in the district, because even after you retire, if we have questions, we know where to find you. Just remember, we know where you live. Good luck. Have a great time. We'll definitely miss you. Like Director Gunther, I really will miss working with you. But I am also very confident that you leave the district in very good hands.
Thank you.
Well, Bob, again, obviously, thank you for your service. I would note that they gave a list of organizations that you are associated with. I'm not certain they noted that you were president of each of those organizations, with possibly no exceptions: Cal DSAL, KUA, Fremont Rotary, etc. Also, it's gratitude to your family, because this is a 24/7 job. You're always on the within a phone's reach and have to come back and respond to what's going on. And it's not something you can forget about when you walk out the office and shut the door. I believe personally that you're the hardest working employee that I have encountered at ACWD or my professional life. You put in extraordinary hours and diligence and detail. So, and I recall how you took on the engineering department when as head, and the execution went up dramatically to the point where the finance department was willing to accept the estimates for the workload when they were developing the budget. which I had not done prior to your arrival as head of the engineering department. So thank you for your service, and do well. May you do well. Bye.
Thank you.
Director Sethi here. Bob, thank you for 30 years of service to the district. That's quite extraordinary. In the corporate world, I know we give out a gold watch to people who have served that long. I'm not sure if we can do the same here, but you're certainly deserving of it. And I especially want to thank you for the time during the couple of years before I was on the board and early years on the board when I was in training wheels, just helping to educate me about the district and the water industry in general, and all your guidance to me personally as a board member. So it was much appreciated. And I'm hoping that we will see you active in the community and still around. And I just generally wish you and your wife and daughter all the best in your future endeavors. And I hope we have a chance to work with you in the future in any capacity. So thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you, Paul.
Bob, I'm going to be echoing a lot of the same sentiments. I mean, thank you so much for all of your service to the district. It's easy for me to say that you're the best general manager that I worked with, but you're also the only general manager I worked with. So it either says a lot or says nothing at all. But I mean, I still remember the first meeting that I had with you after I got elected. And it was obviously a very daunting task ahead of me, but you really sat me down and gave me a lot of the guidance that I needed to be a productive board member from the get-go. And I really appreciated that. I mean, you sat with me and answered so many questions. I felt like I could call you anytime, and I feel like I do call you a lot of odd times. But it's been really personally and professionally helpful, and I really appreciate everything that you've done for me and for the district. And it's also a testament to the fact that you've led this district quite well, that you're leaving the position, but you're leaving it with someone who I think we all have a lot of confidence in. And I think that says a lot about you as well, that you were able to prepare Ed to take on this role. I'm wishing you well, and wishing Lauren and Rachel well as well. They'll hopefully appreciate the extra time they have with you. But yeah, I think retirement will be very exciting, and I'm excited to hear about what you're up to in the next chapter of your life.
Thank you.
Well, wonderful. I did want to open it up to see if there were any staff members who wanted to share any thoughts as well.
Director Akbari, if I may just
Yes.
add this comment. It's very
Yeah, please.
unfortunate that we're going through COVID-19 Zoom public meetings right now, because normally we would have a nice plaque and resolution presented to Bob or any other employee with some photographs taken. So maybe down the road, we might consider assembling everybody back together and invite Bob back in so we can do that in a formal, nice way.
Well, we have an item on the
Absolutely.
agenda where we'll be talking about
Yeah.
those kind of issues, and I'd be happy to come back for a group photo. Thank you, Paul. I'm not far away.
All right. Hearing no more comments, I think we can conclude item, I think this was what, 5.23.
Director Akbari, President Akbari, Ed
Yes.
Stevenson here, and at the very least, I'd like if you would permit me to read staff's recommendation so that the board can take action on this item.
You're right. I skipped that. Sorry about that.
You know, there may be some hesitancy to actually take action on this item, and I understand that. But if you'd permit me, I'd be happy to do that.
First of all,
Yes,
I think
please.
there's a member of the public that wish to address the board.
Yeah, I think I saw, was that Ken N with their hand up?
Yes, if you may would permit me to make a brief comment on this, President Akbari.
Absolutely.
Yes, as many of you know, I've been attending district board meetings as a member of the public for many years. Bob, you happen to be the third general manager I've seen retire from the district. I truly appreciate your willingness to work with the public, and I do believe that you have the interest of the customer at heart. I will miss your sense of humor, but I wish you well in retirement, and I hope to see you around in Fremont in the coming days. Thank you very much for your hard work and leaving the district in a strong position and a true asset to the Tri-City community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nishimura. Mr. Stevenson, I think there's a staff recommendation.
Yeah, staff's recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution honoring Robert T. Shaver and expressing appreciation for his 30 years of dedicated service to the district. And I'll just add, for one, I have very much benefited from learning from Bob and my whole career here at ACWD, and I know many, many others have as well. He's been a great example. You talked about his work ethic. He's been a great example to others, but he's also been part of the ACWD culture and that family atmosphere. And he sincerely will be very much missed by his many friends and colleagues here at ACWD.
Thank you for that comment, Mr. Stevenson. And I would like to make that motion. I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll go ahead and second.
Okay, Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Wonderful. Okay, I think we're moving around a little bit. We're going to jump back to item 5.10, authorization of change order for the rubber dam number 1. I believe we had Director Weed. Were you going to abstain from this item or recuse yourself from this item?
I was going to abstain on item 5.10, but I can do that at the time of the vote. It's not, I don't need to recuse, I don't believe I need to recuse myself, but I have not, I had in the past and for other circumstances, but since I didn't vote on this earlier, voting on a change would be a reason for abstention.
Okay. Are there any directors who wish for this item, for a presentation on this item, or should we move to a vote?
I move to staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Great.
Okay, Directors Weed is
Abstain.
abstaining. Okay, Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Moving on to item 5.11, I think Director Gunther, you are going to recuse yourself on this
Yes,
item, is that correct?
I need to leave the room because I live too close.
I believe Mr. Warren will be able to move you into a breakout room.
Yes, I sure will. Give me one moment.
Time to go to Kansas.
And here you go. Okay, President Akbari, I believe that Director Gunther is now in the breakout room.
Great. Item 5.11, are there any directors who have questions or want to make comments on this item? Or is there a motion on the table?
I'll move staff recommendation.
I can second recommendation. I did have a question when I saw reimbursement costs. I was a bit wondering who's going to reimburse us? Is the city or Union Sanitary District? I mean, where does that reimbursement come in?
Thank
Sure.
you. Thank you, Director Weed. Mr. Stevenson can respond to that question.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This, in my view, is another one of our good news stories. It's essentially a cooperative arrangement between ACWD and the city of Union City. And so what this is through this, through some recent discussions with the city of Union City, we've worked with them to add additional paving work to the district's Alvarado Niles Pipeline Seismic Improvement Project. And that additional paving work, it will help the city advance their pavement replacement program in an expedited and efficient way. And so this is to add work to our Alvarado Niles Pipeline project to include a lot more paving scope. And because that incremental work is to benefit the city of Union City, and is not necessarily directly related to our project, although it is within the same alignment of our project, the city of Union City would be reimbursing the district for the incremental cost of that paving work. There is another, just to be clear, there is another smaller element of work in this change order that has to do with crosswalk recoloring, and that part, we do have a part of that cost to $56,700, but the vast majority of this overall cost is going to be reimbursed by the city of Union City.
Fantastic. I recall when Union City and a prior public works director was trying to get the district to pave their streets for them whenever we did any cut in the street itself. So we've got things back on track.
Mr. Stevenson, this is Paul Sethi. I would like to make a request that at a future engineering and IT committee meeting, that we have some pictures presented on the work that's being performed, because this is quite an extensive project. And I would really like to see up close what is going on. I have not made a trip over there yet, but it would be interesting to have some presentation in the engineering committee.
We will definitely do that. We are planning an item as an update coming up, and we will share some photos and provide a little bit more status information. So yes, we will do that. Thank you.
I'll move the staff recommendation on item 5.11.
I can second.
I think we, okay.
It's okay. So Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther, Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Great. Let's bring
I'll
Director
move
back.
Director Gunther back to the main meeting. Give me
Perfect.
1 moment. And he should be returning any moment.
Okay, great. We have Director Gunther back.
I'm back.
We will, perfect. We are now moving on to item 5.16. And I think Director Sethi, did you have a comment on this item? Was that?
Yes, I have a few
Okay.
remarks I would like to make. I'm supporting the initiative here, but I did want to bring to the surface some things that I think are very important for the public, and I'm hoping we will publicize what we are doing here better, because I can remember the day when we were offering like 50 cents a square foot for turf replacement and increase it to $1. Now we're up to $2, which is where our companion water districts are, and also increasing the square footage up to 1,500 square feet. So residential customers can apply for apply to this program and receive up to $3,000 in rebates from ACWD to take out their lawns and put in water efficient landscaping. And this is the future of our district. One concern I have is that after checking with staff, we only have allocated about $200,000 for the upcoming fiscal year and another $100,000 or so for the second fiscal year in our budget upcoming. And I really would like us, when we go through the budget revision for the second year, to increase the dollar amount moving forward for this type of program. Conjunctively, I think, we do a pretty good job of alerting people to this program, but I think we really need to ham it up a bit, especially during a drought period. And we have 85,000 customers, maybe around 65,000 are residential customers. And we have a long way to go to get people to take out their lawns and replace them with water efficient gardening. I would like to ask the staff to perhaps put together a little brainstorm session on ways to better promote the program. Some thoughts I can offer are, I think that with every turf replacement we do in somebody's front yard, there should be a sign that says courtesy of Alameda County Water District Turf Replacement Program or Water Efficient Landscape Program, up to $3,000 in rebates available, contact so-and-so, so that the word spreads among all your neighbors when you see a new yard going in. And you keep that sign up for a month so that people in the neighborhood are better aware of the program. And number two, I think that there's an opportunity to work with the nurseries in the local area to make them more familiar with our program as well, so that they're promoting it to their customers, and maybe even there's some literature that's available for people to pick up at the local nurseries. Third thing, and this is where I've heard a lot of community feedback when I've been to our evening or Saturday water efficient landscape gardening classes that are sponsored by BOSCA and ACWD, is that people don't know where to turn for the needed tools that they need. They don't know where to find a California licensed professional landscape person. Those are licensed people in the state of California. So it would be good on our website if we had frequently asked questions, and here's a list of people, professional people you can contact. Number two, where do you buy the water efficient landscaping? Most of the nurseries don't carry this kind of stock. And the nearest one here is in San Mateo to our district, that's commonly used by people on the peninsula. So we need available resources, where to find and order your plants and materials and other things to transform your yard. There's another one up in Concord with all the water efficient landscaping and succulents and everything, but we don't have anything like that right here in our local community. I think there's another one in Mountain View as well. And I was recently on the City of Denver Water District website that somebody had referenced me to, where they have a whole cascade of different types of gardens you can put in, water efficient gardens. Las Vegas has the same thing. It's a website resource so that you can help plan your garden and what goes in and what's best for the local weather and environment. And so I just want to encourage us. I think there's a real opportunity here. We're only putting in a small dent with 200,000 and another 100,000 next year. I really would like to encourage us to really increase those dollar amounts down the road. And so I'll leave that with the staff here. I think a good brainstorm session where you can come up with additional ideas would be really helpful. And I look forward to a progress update sometime down the road. Thank you.
Might I? Thank you, Director Sethi. It's a desirable program. However, and as you noted, the dollar amount will soon be overwhelmed. Yesterday, Santa Clara Valley Water District, or now also known as the Valley Water District, directed a request for a 15% reduction from 2019 and a 33% reduction from 2013. 2019 being the benchmark being used now by San Francisco Public Utility Commission for their and BOSCA, and we may wish to adopt that as well. But 33% from what was done only 6 years ago may well require the elimination of all outdoor irrigation for most lawns in our community. While this will take care of a small number, we're going to be looking at a community of brown lawns in a year or two, because we're not quite as bad shape as Santa Clara. But it's coming, and the demand and the programs are regional with the media. So while this is good, don't be amazed to find it frustrating given the size of the demand for people to do something with their lawns other than see them turn brown and die. Thank you.
And just to add to Director Weed's comment here, the dollar amounts that we've allocated for the next 2 fiscal years amounts to only about 100 to 200 homes out of around, maybe 62,000, 65,000 residential customers. We have a long way to go with this program, and we need to invest in it in a much more serious way. That's why I pulled this item from the agenda. And I really plan on just personally trying to better promote this around the community.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any other directors who wish to make a comment? If not, we'll open it up to members of the public if there are any comments or questions on this item. Mr. Kennan.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, I think what Director Sethi was saying is, it would be nice if the process were helped along by more information. I mean, I did take a look at the process, and it's pretty detailed, and there are lots of rules and requirements and regulations to satisfy. And again, having a resource, a one-stop shop resource, maybe hosted on your website that details, how to meet all the requirements and who can help you meet all the requirements would be helpful. Because, in order to qualify for the rebate, it appears that you just can't, just simply removing your lawn and replacing with something isn't good enough. And it would be, I think, bad for the district and for the customers if a lot of customers went ahead and did this, and then for one reason or another didn't dot all the I's across all the T's and were denied. I think that would result in negative press for the district, and I think we don't want that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other members of the public who wish to make a comment or ask a question? If not, we'll turn it back to the board. Is there a motion on the table?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Sure. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Moving on to item 5.17, authorization of change order for the advanced metering infrastructure project for customer service line inventory. And I will turn it to the general manager.
Thank you, President Akbari, and I will turn it to our Manager of Engineering and Technology Services, Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. And this is a joint effort with our operations department and the AMI project, but I'm happy to read the staff report and answer questions as needed. So the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project will implement AMI technology throughout the district's service area. The board previously awarded a contract to furnish and deploy an AMI system to Badger Meter Incorporated. And the project includes upgrading all water meters throughout the district's service area. Because every water meter in the district is included in this project, there's an opportunity to conduct any other needed work involving all district meters and water services within the district and include them within the project. The United States Environmental Protection Agency's proposed revised lead and copper rule would require that an inventory of the material types of all customer side service lines be developed by water providers so that customers can be notified of the presence of any leaded materials on the customer's side of the service line, and so that the water agency can implement procedures to minimize the risk of lead exposure to customers should leaded materials be present. Utilizing the AMI meter installation contractor to identify the service line material, collect, input, and transfer the data into a district database will allow for the development of this inventory in the most cost-effective and efficient manner. There is adequate funding in the proposed 2-year budget for this expenditure. This item was reviewed with the Operations and Water Quality Committee on May 17, 2021. Implementation of this change would help meet the district's strategic plan goal 1.2, continue to meet water quality standards 100% of the time. And staff's recommendation is by motion, approve change order number 4 in the amount of $494,500 to Badger Meter Incorporated for the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project, job 21231. And I'd be happy to start to address whatever questions you may have. And I know that we have folks from operations and maintenance here to assist with questions that I can't answer.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
None from Sethi.
I got a couple. I'm not a real thrilled fan of the lead copper rule. I'd be very curious to see what the numbers are in our district of lead and copper or lead lines coming off on the customer side. I can understand back east, the lines are older, the systems are older. Maybe we got some stuff going on up in Niles, maybe, who knows, in Centerville areas, Irvington perhaps. I'd be very interested to see what the results are and see if somebody in the EPA is searching for a problem that doesn't exist. Certainly, it'll exist in some communities, no question. But I'm not so certain it's here. But I'd love to find out what the exact numbers are when we're done with here. Data's great. Actually curious what this is going to show, but I really would like a feedback or presentation back to us as to what we really got out there when this is done. Because to be honest, I really don't think we're going to see a whole heck of a lot of copper line or lead lines.
Yeah, we've done an inventory of our own service lines in our own system, and through that process to comply with prior legislation, we've not identified lead service lines in our service area. We don't expect that there'll be much in the way of leaded service lines on the customer's side, but this work is to verify that and to verify the material types that are there so that we can develop that service line inventory and be compliant with the regulation. And the idea here is to try and do it in the most cost-efficient way, given that we already have a contractor touching every one of those meter locations.
I don't disagree with what staff's doing. I think it's great. This is a
Yeah.
great opportunity. The other question is, what happens if we find something on the customer side? Doesn't belong to us.
Right. In that case, we would notify them, and then it's kind of their responsibility at that point. But at least we would know about it. There would be obligations by the district should we find a leaded service line, and I'll ask my friends in operations to support me here because I'm not 100% certain, but as I understand it, I believe should we identify a leaded service line, we'd notify them, but we'd also have to take some additional measures should we need to work on their water service or disrupt their water service. We'd have to provide separate notification and provide, say, point of use filtering and take other steps to make sure that they're protected from any sort of increased hazard from lead exposure.
Yes, sir, that's correct. You pretty much covered the additional requirements. Yes, sir. If we do have any service lines identified as lead on the customer side, we will need to do those things that Ed just mentioned.
All right. Some questions? Then it's not a requirement under this $500,000 contract to verify our inventory of the district's service line to the meter, correct?
That's correct. That's not the objective of this particular item, right?
Next, when initially proposed, it was suggested that this was an effort to identify lead service lines rather than an inventory of the existing materials of each, to which I suggested that we offer $5,000 for every one that they find. And with our understanding that there are none, we would save ourselves $500,000 and have an incentive to be able to find them. I still think it may be helpful to offer a significant reward should they find a service line which doesn't meet the, which is lead or is suspect. The other thing I was concerned, I was hoping that we could find some way to evaluate the integrity of the service lines when they're putting in the meters, particularly between the meter and the customer in their house, to somehow work with them to be able to turn off their and on the shutoff valve at their residence or business and see if the meter was still flowing. That would be one of our greatest losses of water. And since we have the people there, hopefully we can work with the customers. But currently, my understanding is that's not part of the agreement or the scope of work. So, thank you.
You're correct. That's not part of the scope of work as it's stated, as it's laid out here. This is spending only a few minutes at each meter box location to identify that material and then move on to the next meter. It doesn't involve other testing of the customer's plumbing.
Even with their cooperation where they would participate with the person and have them check it out for them. Because our people would know how to read a meter and whether it's active or not, or our contractors would. Thank you.
Director Weed, I think with the installation of the AMI, if there is an integrity issue on the customer side of the meter, once the system is up and running, the AMI with the ultrasonic meter should show that, and we will have an ability to inform customers that it looks like they have a leak.
All right, thank you. And one final note, much of the lead problem in Flint were the fixtures inside the home and the plumbing inside the home, which was required by plumbing code at the time. So I don't know that we have any of that, but if we come across it, hope to ask people to inform us if in conversations they uncover some of these antiquated plumbing systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. Any other comments or questions from the board? Hearing none, I will open it up to members of the public. Are there any members of the public who have a question or wish to make a comment on this item? If not, is there a motion from the board?
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Great, roll call, please.
Sure. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Moving on to item 5.18, resolution adopting the fiscal year 2021-2022 and fiscal year 2022-2023 budget and the 25-year capital improvement program. And I will turn it over to our general manager, Bob Shaver.
Thank you, President Akbari. Adopting a new 2-year budget and updated capital improvement program is sort of our financial circle of life. And it's a milestone for the district, and our manager of finance, Mr. Wunderlich, will start this item.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Shaver. The board previously reviewed the budget in detail at the and the CIP at the May 19th and May 27th board budget workshops. At those workshops, staff also responded to questions from the board, and that feedback from the board and that guidance is now incorporated into the final proposed budget before you this evening. The preliminary proposed budget was also reviewed with the Finance Committee in April. In review and adoption of the proposed fiscal year 2021-22 and fiscal year 2022-23 budget and the 25-year CIP will help meet the district's strategic plan goals 3.2, ensure cost reasonableness, and 3.3, promote financial transparency. And Mr. Alm, our supervising financial analyst, is here with us this evening to provide a staff presentation on this item. And the staff recommendation for board consideration this evening, following Mr. Alm's presentation, is by motion, adopt a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021-22 and fiscal year 2022-23 budget in the 25-year capital improvement program. And so with that introduction, I will turn it over to Mr. Alm to provide the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Wunderlich. Good evening, President Akbari, members of the board. My name is Sidney Alm. I'm the supervising financial analyst. So I will be providing the presentation for this item. We could move on to the next slide with our agenda. So here's our agenda for this evening for this item. Is highlight the assumptions and updates since the budget workshops. The board had 2 budget workshops last month. Review the proposed budget and the metrics from the financial planning model, and finally staff recommendation. Here's a circle of life that the general manager just called it. This represents the district's 2-year budget cycle. The current budget development process started in December. That's the red circle. The preliminary proposed budget was reviewed at the Finance Committee in April, and the board reviewed the proposed budget earlier last month in May at the budget workshops. And here we are in June with the final proposed budget for board consideration and adoption. So the proposed 2-year budget included some key assumptions, and I just want to quickly go through those again. We talked about this already at the workshop. The projected bill demands are 35.5 million gallons per day for fiscal year 21-22 and 36.3 million gallons per day for the following year, slightly higher than current bill demands. These are consistent with the budgeted water purchase volumes. The budget included $13.8 million payment towards the unfunded liabilities for the pension and the retiree health benefits to achieve full funding by June 2032. We're on track for that. SFPUC, they're delaying the rate increase for another year, but we anticipate a 5.4% increase for fiscal year 22-23. 4 positions were added to the proposed budget. 2 engineers in project engineering to support the CIP. 1 defined term customer service representative to support the AMI program, and 1 operation system position in O&M department. 1 reclassification of an engineer position to a construction inspector in development services to meet the need of the department. And the budget continued the existing defined term positions. Next slide, please. So continue with the budget assumption. The budget included costs for the Delta Conveyance Project, Los Vaqueros Reservoir Expansion Project, and the joint Purified Water Feasibility Evaluation. Those are included. Full funding of the CIP is included in the budget, with investments in various projects to enhance system reliability and other critical infrastructure. We expected to receive $19.5 million in loan proceeds from the state revolving fund for our AMI program. And the budget does assume a 3% rate increase effective March 1, 2022, and a 3% increase effective March 1, 2023. So there were, as Mr. Wunderlich indicated, there were some revisions to the budget since the budget workshops. We added the remaining $1 million grant from Oliver De Silva. We added costs for the conservation program changes for the drier condition. You heard about a part of that earlier this evening. Lowered chemical costs, and we added $4 million for water purchase costs for additional water. And 3 positions were added: a special assistant to the general manager, information security officer, and water operations analyst. 2 of those positions starting in fiscal year 22-23. Okay, so this is looking at our total revenue budget for all fund. Overall, we start looking at the current fiscal year 2021. The estimated actual revenues are expected to come in at about $5 million below the amended budget. That's looking at the third column from left, comparing $155.7 million to $160.9 million. This is primarily due to a decline in customer jobs revenue as development flattens out, and also the timing for completion of grants funded projects. For the proposed budget years, the next 2 budget years, the total revenues are expected to stay relatively flat at $154 million. As water revenue and property tax trended upward, see those line items there, and facility connection charges trend lower. Grants and reimbursement revenues tail off, as we expect to complete major grant funded projects over the next couple of years. Now, this is our district total expenses for all funds. The current fiscal year 2021, the estimated actual is about $15 million below the amended budget, 160 compared to $165.1 million. This is mostly due to the timing of the capital projects expenditures. And for the proposed 2-year budget, the total expenses are relatively flat at $163 million for each of the fiscal year. So now we're looking at the total cash balances for all funds again. Fiscal year 1920 ended better than originally estimated. So as a result of that, fiscal year 2021, that's the current year, started off with close to $9 million higher beginning balance. That's $194.5 million That's the top row, compared to 185.3 million. So estimated, the amended budget was 185. The actual estimate is 194.5. So we expect to finish the current fiscal year, again, the fiscal year 2021, at about $4 million better than the amended budget. That's $190 million compared to $186 million. The projected ending balances for the two budget years are slightly higher than the current fiscal year estimated actual. That's the $191 million compared to $189, and that's mainly due to the expected debt proceeds, the $9.8 million for each of the next two fiscal years. So this shows the district's reserves and some key debt indicators. I don't want to go through each of this item, but the main takeaway for this is that look at the reserves. They meet or they exceed the established reserve targets set by the board. And look at the reserve each category. The board, as a consent calendar this evening, the board approved the updated statement of the reserve fund policy, and staff will reflect that in the monthly budget report to the finance committee in future months. Okay. I think one slide up. Thank you. So this pie chart, again, you've seen this before, illustrate the percentage breakdown of the total general fund, the labor cost by cost center. So break out the general fund expenses by cost center, break out the labor portion of that. This pie chart is for fiscal year 21-22 proposed budget, totaling $156 million. Just looking at the three largest cost center, the source of supply, the blue, that makes up 27% of the total. 4% is labor. Operations and maintenance make up 29% of the total, and 19% is labor. And finally, CIP, the capital projects, makes up 23% of total, and 1%, very small piece of that is labor. Overall, for fiscal year 21-22, the proposed budget, labor is 34% of the total general fund expenses. Okay. Right, now we're looking at very similar slide. This is for fiscal year 22-23. So for this one, the total proposed budget, general fund expenses is $155.6 million. The overall labor component is 35% of the total. This slide shows the proposed CIP by program, just give a snapshot over the next 10 years or the 10-year period. Notice that the program is set up to stagger projects, such that some projects are in the design phase, while other projects are in the construction. And the bulk of the costs happen during the construction phase of the projects. Okay, now we'll take a look at several key metrics from the district's financial planning model. This first one shows the ending cash balances for the general fund. As shown here, the ending cash balances for the proposed budget in the middle of the chart there are above the reserve targets. I'm looking ahead through fiscal year 25-26, the projected ending balance in the low year, which is in the fiscal year 25-26, is $23 million above the reserve target. This is looking at the the debt coverage ratios. That is comparing the net revenues to the annual debt service payment. As indicated by the dotted blue line, that's the ratio. The district continues to maintain strong debt coverage ratios over the planning period, at well above the 200% target set by the board. Debt coverage ratio dropped to about 500% by fiscal year 25-26. And that's primarily due to the debt service payment for the state revolving fund loan I mentioned earlier. This metric compares the operating revenues to operating expenses. As shown here, the operating expenses represented by the blue bars. They're projected to exceed operating revenues starting in fiscal year 23-24. That's in a couple of years. What this means is that the district relies on other revenue sources to fill the funding gaps, to cover the operating expenses. Currently, the district gets about $12 million annually in property tax revenues and over $2.5 million in interest income. And those funds are used to fill the gaps. This metric compares the rate charge revenue specific to the rate and charge revenue to revenue requirement. Or revenue requirement is the total operations and maintenance expenses plus debt service. Looking at, okay, can rate and charge revenue cover that? Like the previous metric, this indicates that there are funding gaps. And again, the district relies on other revenue sources to fund the gaps. This gives a picture of the final metric. It shows the planned CIP cost and the funding sources. There are various funding sources for a CIP program.
Sydney?
Yes.
I think you have
Sydney,
a
I think there's a
question.
question.
Okay.
Director Sethi here, Mr. Oam. On the previous slide, number 17. What rate increase assumption are we making here through 2026?
So there wasn't a rate increase effective March 2021. However, the model assumes a 3% annual rate increase starting in fiscal year March 1, 2022.
And do we have an early estimate of what the necessary rate increase would be to cover all of our revenue requirements and CIP?
We can plug in the financial planner model, but we didn't do that. We were saving it for the rate workshop discussion that would start in August, so we can take a look at that.
Okay, so because a rate increase in 1 year flows through all the subsequent years, is it reasonable to assume that a 4% rate increase might cover everything out into the future years? The next rate increase that we make?
So the purpose of this metric is really to show that the rate and charge revenue alone is not sufficient to cover total district operations with that service. This is to indicate that the district does relies on other revenue sources that the district can count on, as I mentioned, property tax revenues and interest income and such to fill the gap.
Okay, thank you. We'll get into a deeper dive in August at our workshop. Thank you.
Quick clarification, if I might. You said a 3%. That was 3% a year every year?
That's yes.
Thank you.
Okay, no more question. I will continue with this. I was just saying that this is showing the CIP program over this is the 8-year period, actuals, the estimated actuals and the proposed budget and into the planning horizon. Just look at the big bar there, the pay-as-you-go general fund CIP that makes up the most. It totals $271 million over the 8-year period, and then the total for all fund is about $360 million. Just a summary of our CIP program through fiscal year 25-26. Okay, this is our recommendation for this item. adopt a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021-22 and fiscal year 2022-23 budget and the 25-year capital improvement program. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any more questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ohm. Go ahead, Director Weed.
On the capital improvement budget, you had a list of projects. I did not see LVE on there. Does this CIP include projects which the board has not approved?
Yeah, so look, maybe I can take that. Yes, it at the 25-year CIP, as you look out into the future, absolutely includes many projects the board has not yet voted on. You know, they're planned by staff within the CIP, but obviously actually spending the money on those projects as presented would be contingent on future board action to approve the project or our participation. And LVE is a great example of that.
Would it be possible to have a list of the projects with the dollar amounts that are included in the CIP, which have yet to be approved by the board?
Well, I think for any years beyond the next year or two, that's going to be most of the CIP.
Okay, well, even that would be helpful, just as, or maybe show the ones that have been approved. Maybe the easier way to do it. That so we know what the dollar amounts are for what we've approved and where we stand. And some of these projects continue to grow. I noticed the AMI began at 30 million, went to 50, and now is showing us 77 million plus interest because if we're borrowing money. It's going to be about $1,000 per customer.
So one important thing to note with AMI in particular is it's a 25-year CIP and the meters have a 20-year useful life. So the reason why it's 75 million is because it includes the full replacement of the system toward the tail end of the CIP. So AMI is essentially in there twice, once now and once 20 years from now. So it's not that the current iteration has gone up to that amount. But I would defer to Mr. Stevenson as far as the feasibility of presenting the CIP in the manner you're requesting.
Yeah, we can certainly carve out the projects that there's already been board approval on, approving the project, say with CEQA, or approving a contract to construct it, or things along those lines. And Mr. Wunderlich is correct. It would be a much shorter list than the CIP in general. The CIP, again, is a planning document. And so it includes projects out for the next 24 years, 25 years in total. And so there's a lot out there that the board has not taken formal action on.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this item from the board? If not, let me open it up to members of the public. Are there any questions or comments on this item from members of the public? And I see two hands raised. Let's start with Mr. Ken N.
Thank you, President Akbari. Due to scheduling conflicts, I was unable to attend the entirety of the budget workshops relating to the proposed 2021-22 and 22-23 budget. However, specifically in slides 46 of the presentation material, I note a fairly detailed list of assumptions which were used in the budget model, including specific changes to staffing levels. However, I find a specific assumption glaringly missing. What is the assumed increase in labor costs, that is, wages and salaries, used for the budget model? As Director Weed has pointed out on multiple occasions, the district apparently enjoys a healthy markup on water sales. Hence, labor costs must be a significant portion of district expenses. If so, why is the impact of increasing labor costs not specifically called out in the budget process? For each percentage point increase in wages and salaries, what impact does it have on a typical household water bill? From your pie chart, 34% of expenses are labor in fiscal 21-22. Does that mean that a 3% increase in labor costs translate into a 1% increase in rates? I know I am not alone in being concerned about the lack of transparency about the impact of labor costs on water rates. In 2018, the Alameda County Grand Jury concurred with many of my concerns, and while the district agreed to being more forthcoming about the impact of labor costs during the rate increase hearing process, the Prop 218 process, to not have them clearly specified in the budget process denies the public critical information required to provide meaningful input at a time point where the budget is being drafted, rather than at a subsequent rate hearing where the district finances are a fait accompli. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nishimura. Mr. Kelly Abreu.
Thank you. When it comes to the CIP, we just heard that that was a lump sum cost over 20 or 25 years. And that's not a very good way of doing accounting, I think. If you look at these solar panels, the people who sell solar panels talk about the flow rate of the energy, that's called watts. They also talk about the cost per unit, that's called the levelized cost of energy. And they do a lot of complicated things to arrive at a levelized cost. So, you know, if you have this lump sum, it should be converted into some rational figures that make sense. I don't know what exactly is rational in the water business, but it might be cost per acre foot, cost per year to the district, cost per customer, cost whatever. The costs have to be metered out, apportioned out in some accounting fashion, such that you could have a small project that you put out, that you decide to do for 5 or 10 years, which has a small price tag, and another project which you're doing for 50 years that has a huge price tag. And really, the small price one might be more expensive if you end up doing it over and over again. I don't know. That's my take on it. This accounting is not levelized. It's not rational.
Thank you, Mr. Abreu. Would staff like to respond to either of the questions?
Sure, I can go ahead and provide some responses. We'll go in reverse order, starting with Mr. Abreu. I think, you know, when it comes to the district's financial reporting, the budget is done on a cash basis, and really that's the reason we do it that way, is because that's really is what drives our rates, our cash situation, and whether we're meeting our reserves. And so, you know, that's the way we've traditionally done it. Of course, we also report on an accrual basis for the audited financial statements, and that provides a different type of picture of the district's overall financial standing. And so when it comes to, you know, I think an example was given with solar panels. You know, when we're looking at a project like that, you know, at the time that it moves forward, we would incorporate those estimated future savings into our future cash flow projections in our financial planning model. In regard to Mr. Nishimura's comments in regard to employee costs or labor costs, slides 56 and 57 of the budget workshop presentations do provide the direct wage costs on slide 56 and the benefit costs on 57. So it's, you know, I think very clearly shown there how much labor costs are increasing, you know, total labor costs, wages and benefits inclusive over the budget period. And, you know, the district, it's kind of a little challenging to maybe take a direct percentage in terms of if labor increased, you know, say 1%, what's the effect on rates? Just because we have a number of other funding sources other than just water revenues, such as property taxes, facilities connection charges, and other sources. But if we were to assume that we did not have any of those other revenue sources, so kind of maybe a worst case perspective, you can see that what's proposed for the fiscal year 21-22 budget is approximately $60 million total for district wages and benefits, total all-inclusive labor costs, and water rates revenue of about 120 million for about a 2-to-1 ratio. So so each 1% increase in labor costs would correspond to about a 0.5% increase in water rates. And again, that is a very conservative approach because it assumes no other revenue sources.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Wunderlich. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the public? If not, I will turn it back to the board. Is there a motion on the table for item 518?
I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendation for approval or adoption of the resolution approving the FY 2021-22 and FY 2022-23 budget and the 25-year capital improvement program.
I'll second.
Great. Roll call, please.
Sure. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Great. Moving on to 519, authorization to enter into agreement for the leasing of light duty vehicles. And I will turn it to our general manager.
Thank you, President Akbari. It is my pleasure to request Mr. Arens to introduce this, what I think is an innovative approach for this district and potentially very beneficial. And I turn it over to him, our Manager of Operations and Maintenance.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver, President Akbari, members of the board. This item before you tonight takes a new look at the way we manage and finance our vehicle fleet. We have a brief presentation tonight for you. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Dan Stevenson, our facility maintenance manager, who also has the privilege of managing our district fleet. So he'll go through some of the more detailed elements of the program, and then we'll be here to answer any questions you might have. So Dan, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Arens. Good evening, honorable board and fellow staff members and members of the public. Yeah, so here this evening to talk about the light duty vehicle leasing program. Next slide, please. So before I get started, let me just give a general background on how we currently manage the fleet. And so we have some 225 rolling stock, which includes a bunch of different vehicles and equipment. So this program would be looking at the light duty vehicles. So of that 225, currently 82 of those are light duty. And the classification of light duty vehicles are those that are 1 ton and below. So that would include cars and small SUVs. Of those 82, currently 10 of them, or I'm sorry, currently 47 of them are 10 years and older. So the district made a move sometime back, I think during the last economic downturn, we used to manage vehicles for 10 years to 100,000 miles, which is more common in many of the other agencies, which we used to do, but now we've extended the life. And now we're kind of seeing that we've got some of these older vehicles. So we've identified 62 of those 82, which are really essentially half ton and lower. And the reason for that was the 1 ton and the 3/4 tons typically have utility bodies, so they're customized to some level. We send those vehicles to auction when we are done with them. And we have a little bit of variability and volatility in the auction market in that whoever shows up that day, what they're looking for, what they need. So that doesn't mean that we always get the best price on the resale of a vehicle. Those older vehicles, as they age, they get increased repairs, unscheduled maintenance. I mean, it just goes as a vehicle ages, you can expect those things. And then the vehicles, they're sold at or near the end of their useful life, meaning that at 15 years, they're probably at the lower end of their curve. Next slide, please. So we received a proposal from Enterprise, which is, you're probably familiar with the Enterprise car rental company. So same company. They just have a government leasing branch. So they work with different governments to lease vehicles. And so it's a little bit different than what you may see on a commercial, or if you've ever entered in a personal vehicle, automotive lease. This is a program where they lease in bulk. And so what it means for the district is that there's no early termination fees, no mileage, so we're not restricted there. Wear and tear, there's not any penalties for that. And one thing I do want to highlight as we go through this, we can get out at any time with the caveat that we do, that's after the first year, we're committed for 1 year, but after that we can get out at any time, whether it's the entire program, a portion of the program, or or any fraction thereof. So the way that they structure those leases is they're based on a five-year purchase essentially, but they take the value of the car over 5 years. So for example, if we had a $30,000 vehicle, 5 years would be 60 payments. So you'd pay $500 a month on that vehicle. And as you're paying, you're building equity. So you own a portion of that vehicle. And when that vehicle is sold, then the district receives that equity back. So what Enterprise does as part of their program is they look to optimize the resale value of that vehicle. And that's generally anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And so they look at the condition of the vehicle, mileage, some of the extenuating factors of the vehicle, but then they also look at external factors such as market and what the market may yield on those vehicles at that time. So they try to essentially hit that sweet spot of what the peak valuation for that vehicle is. Next slide, please. So some of what that means for us is, and what makes the program work is Enterprise purchases their vehicles through the same co-op consortium bid model that we use here at the district. I say that to say that it meets our public purchasing guidelines. It's through a Sourcewell approved contractor. The only difference is they're privy to a volume discount that we wouldn't normally get. So what that means is that their upfront purchase cost is generally about $2,500 to $3,500 cheaper than what we would actually purchase them for. As I mentioned, we would replace the fleet every 5 years, but that would mean that no vehicle that we would have in this vehicle class would be older than 5 years while we owned it. And what that means for us is we would get decreased maintenance and repair costs. That's just because the vehicles will be earlier on in their life cycle arc, they're typically under warranty. Things just tend to not break as much when they're that young. We would take advantage of newer technologies, and we would see a decrease in emissions and fuel costs. Typically year over year, emission standards increase and improve. So therefore the vehicles would use less fuel, say, than one of our current fleet that we have that's 10, 12 years old. Another feature as technology advances on vehicles is that you generally improve safety features on vehicles. So I've listed a couple here. One is the electronic stability control, which was not available, 5-10 years ago. Forward collision warning. Backup cameras used to be sort of an option. They're fairly standard now. So there's more, as technology improves, the vehicle safety enhancements also improve, which will hopefully increase employee safety and reduce accidents. And then what I think is probably the biggest benefit for the district, and for me personally as the fleet manager, is the flexibility of the program. The program allows for the flexibility for us to expand or contract the fleet as we need to. So that means that we could add vehicles, or we could send vehicles back to Enterprise if we find that we're not using them enough. And then built into that flexibility is our ability to change the complexion of the fleet, particularly in this classification of light duty. There's CARB requirements, that's the California Air Resources Board, or there's proposed requirements, I should say. They've proposed to have heavy and medium duty fleet vehicles to be full electric by 2045. The state of California has also moved to eliminate the sale of vehicles of fossil fuels by 2035. So there's a lot of factors at play. To my knowledge, the medium and heavy duty electric vehicles are not available in the marketplace yet, but the light duty ones are. So we've been talking for some time about trying to integrate the fleet. We feel it's a responsible thing to do, and quite frankly, we feel that the world is headed there, and we'd like to get the district in line with that in terms of our fleet. So we want to pilot a couple of electric vehicles at this point. But the flexibility that's built into this program would allow us to transition the fleet on a quicker basis, and we would be able to do that as we were ready, as we build infrastructure for charging stations, those kind of things. So that's sort of a long-term objective, but it's one of the features that I think that's good about this program. And then, of course, there is an overall program savings. So next slide, please. So the financials on this, I worked with Mr. Ohm, who we just heard from, and Martin Karan. They indulged me and built a giant spreadsheet, and we looked at all these different scenarios. We did a lot of modeling, one, to validate all the numbers, but two, just to make sure that we ran different scenarios and make sure that the program actually yielded the return it would. And we feel very confident in these numbers, that we would save about $76,000 a year from this program. And so those costs that are built into that is about $34,000 in reduced maintenance costs, and you see there $30,000 a year reduced fuel costs. Those numbers are likely pretty conservative. We'll probably see a little bit better return on that. And then in terms of what the lease financing actually costs, the annualized payments would be about $344,000, and that includes any of the fees in interest. So Enterprise has a pretty standard program. It's 0.1% per month. So that's all built into that number, and that's what's factored into our savings. And one of the features there is that would stabilize our future budgets, at least in this vehicle class. And then I have on there that ACWD, I wanted to reiterate that we can get out at any time if we feel that you know, for any reason, if we don't like it or we don't see the returns that we thought we would. Next slide, please. So here's some of our neighboring agencies that are using the program and that are currently working with Enterprise. Those that we reached out to indicated that the program is working as advertised and sold to them, so they're happy with it. So I see it with us being able to get out of it. I see it as a fairly low risk, in being a way that we could move forward on the fleet. And like I said prior, I appreciate the flexibility component in order to transition our fleet to either partial zero, hybrid plugins, or electric vehicles. Next slide. I think that's it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Let me open it up to the board and see if there are any questions from directors. Questions or comments?
I have one quick question.
Yes, sir.
On the financial analysis, did you account for the cost of putting in many more charging stations?
No, we did not do that as part of this financial. We looked at it in terms of, at some point we're likely to transition anyway, so we would absorb those costs. So whether or not we own the electric vehicles or we lease them, we looked at it that we would have to shoulder that capital cost.
Do you, by offhand, do you know what the cost is per charging station when they're installed, like we put in the front of the district?
I do not. Those preceded me. We're actually going to put in a charging station out back for our pilot, which had an old charging station that was there for some time ago. So that's going to be relatively low cost initially. We're going to do in-house, and it's going to be about $2,000 of equipment to do that. But if depending on the scale that we ramp this up to and how many charging stations we end up installing at a later date, that there'll likely be some considerations at that point in terms of where it's going to go, where the electrical loads come from, how much trenching, if there's any other construction costs that need to go with that.
Couple other questions here real quick. You mentioned we have 250 vehicles of one sort or the other in our rolling stock. Where are these vehicles? Because I don't see that many around our headquarters.
So I used the number 225. We talk about that rolling stock in terms of different vehicles, trailers, pieces of equipment, whether it's a asphalt cutting machine, different things. So that's things that we have asset tags for in our work order system was where that number came from.
Are all those vehicles at the district headquarters, or are they spread around the district?
The vast majority of them are at headquarters. We do have a couple of like trailer generators and different things that are part. There's a few things at TP2, you know, and then the staff vehicles or the vehicles that or the employees that report out of TP2. Some items at the blender TP1.
Mm-hmm. So I think this is a very smart move on our part, and I'm very supportive of making this transition. How early could we adopt this?
So we intend to well, hopefully with the approval, we wanted to do this next month, which is why it's on this this agenda. We wanted to start next fiscal year. We're still not clear on how we're going to phase it in yet. We had originally had 10 vehicles programmed into the next year's capital replacement, but we've been talking about picking a year in which to, so say all the 10-year-old vehicles in this classification to move on there. So we still have to work out how we're going to phase it, but we expect to phase it over the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Stevenson, this was presented to the Water Ops and Water Quality Committee. I was left with the impression that we were looking at light-duty half-ton pickup trucks that were fully EV. You're suggesting that this goes now into standard vehicles of 3/4 and 1 ton as well, which would not be EV?
At this time, no, we're looking at half-ton and less EV.
Okay, so this is truly a light, of the 82 vehicles or so, the number we have, we're really looking at the half-ton vehicle.
Correct, yeah, it's 62 and less are our half-ton fleet.
Okay, I was surprised to read that the EV vehicles weigh twice as much as their counterpart, which is the current vehicles. And with a light duty vehicle, it's always been suggested to me that a half-ton truck was really a passenger car with a different type of chassis on it, a truck chassis. And if you want to go to a truck, you went to a 3/4 ton or greater. So that the light duty, now weighing twice as much as our current light duty, may not have the same experience for wear and tear and the ability of all the other components to be able to carry the additional weight. It would be a concern, but we're going to be monitoring that.
Yep.
Next, Department of Defense, when it came to when to turn over vehicles, monitored the cost of maintenance. And when the maintenance cost exceeded the purchase price, they then surplus the vehicle. That gave them more flexibility, and some stayed in the inventory for extraordinary period of time, either because the conditions they were in were well suited to, or they didn't have that much wear and tear. And some they had some limits, and you could identify the limits based on the high maintenance cost. So I encourage you to consider another factor in evaluating vehicles. Finally, the presentation indicated that we would get $400 on a trade-in with Enterprise. Do we have any information now what our trade-in values are when we turn them in at 15 years or 150,000 miles?
So we used we looked at what our average return is on that. So that we looked at the last 3 years of what we got, and that was, they averaged about $5,000 what we get back. And I think that if I may, the $400 that you're referring to is a fee that that Enterprise charges when they sell the vehicle on our behalf. They take $400 off the top, and that's to prep the vehicle and to
So
send it out.
we get the delta. Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
I guess I can go next. I support the concept, particular, the mention of CARB. CARB is pushing for, it's going to be all electric light vehicles, whether we want it or not. The problem with that is the technology, relatively new, although electric vehicles go back to 100 years ago, 1910-ish or so. So the thing I see with this, though, is it'll give us that flexibility, this lease program, where if we see something as battery life changes, as battery quality changes, as Director Weed pointed out, weight, abilities change, I think the market's going to change rather drastically over the next 5 or 10 years. It looks like this will give us some flexibility to take advantage of those changes as they come out. So yeah, I could support this. I think it's good to be flexible for the next, certainly for the next 10 years. We need to be really flexible when it comes to any type of light vehicle we have.
Thank you for those comments. I'll just share my 2 cents as well. I'm very supportive of this item. Like Director Gunther just mentioned, I think the flexibility is pretty key, and especially with the changing emission standards, and there's quite a bit of innovation going on in the auto industry. I think that flexibility over the next few years is going to be highly valuable to us. One question I had, apart from Enterprise, did we look at any other companies that do similar enterprise fleet leases, and how did these prices compare to other companies?
We actually didn't. We've received a proposal from Enterprise, and we began discussions with them. I'm not aware of any others that actually do it. The fact that they've worked with several neighboring government agencies, but yeah, we didn't solicit bids on this.
Okay.
I think if I could maybe add a little bit, Mr. Stevenson, I think this was done through a cooperative purchasing agreement.
Yeah, they do all their purchase all their vehicles through Sourcewell.
Yeah, so this is a publicly bid through a cooperative purchasing entity, and it's something we frequently utilize because it gets kind of the generally better pricing because they're bidding to Sourcewell, and then many government agencies throughout the country will then use that for purchases.
Understood. Okay. Great. If there are no other questions from the board, let me open it up to members of the public for any questions or comments on this item. Hearing none, I will turn it back to the board to see if there's a motion on this item.
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay, Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Before we move on to the next item, let me ask the board if there are any directors who want to take a break, or should we continue? If there are no strong opinions, I'm going to take that as let's continue. So we will move on to item 5.20, authorization to enter into agreement for distribution system on-call and emergency repair services. And I will turn it to Mr. Shaver.
Thank you, President Akbari. And again, this will be presented at least initially by Mr. Arens.
No, you're stuck with me. Thank you, Mr. Shaver.
And totally, apparently.
Yes. This is just a brief, I guess I'll give a verbal summary of this item. The goal is to provide outside construction support services to support our distribution system. In brief, distribution system repairs are maintained and performed on a daily basis. Outside services are sometimes needed when responding to large leaks or making complex repairs that require deep or complex excavation. Staff do not have the manpower or necessary equipment to perform required work, we often use outside professional services to come in and assist our district staff as needed. To prepare for and meet this need, we went out for a bid for solicitation to secure contracts with underground construction companies to ensure availability for on-call and also for emergency requests. The district received 6 bids from different underground construction companies, and Done Right Excavating Inc. and Garney Pacific Inc. were the 2 contract companies that had the lowest responsive bids. These 2 companies will provide services on a rotational basis when needed to support our water system reliability for customers in accordance with their bid schedules. The district will only pay for services when requested by the district. Sufficient funding is included in the expenses in the proposed budget, as well as will be included in future budgets. The scope of this contract was reviewed with the Operations and Water Quality Committee on June 1st, 2021. And board authorization of this contract will assist the district in achieving strategic plan goal 1.1, efficiently manage and maintain our infrastructure to ensure reliability, and goal 1.3, continuously improve emergency preparedness and response capabilities. In addition, we're recommending by motion to authorize the general manager to enter into agreements for on-call water distribution, repair, and emergency repair services with Done Right Excavating Inc. and Garney Pacific Inc. for a 2-year base term not to exceed $1 million each. And 2, to authorize the general manager to exercise up to 3 1-year extensions if services are satisfactory to the district for a total 5-year term not to exceed $2.5 million each. I also want to clarify that these contracts, the intent of these is not to do the work of staff or to reduce any staffing levels. It's really to augment staff's capabilities where we don't have the necessary equipment or potentially manpower. This could be for a complex repair. Maybe it's a deep excavation that we don't have the large enough equipment, or something that requires deep shoring that we're not prepared to address. And this will also be a key resource in any type of emergency, which could be just as simple as having multiple large leaks that overwhelm our existing staff resources. We want these resources to be able to call in and assist district staff at any time as needed. With that, I will be more than happy to answer any questions or clarify any parts of this contract.
Are there any questions from the board?
Can I lead off with a couple of questions?
Yeah, Director Sethi.
Mr. Ahrens, where are these vendors located?
That I'll have to check. I know they've both done work for us. I don't have their location. I know they're within the general Bay Area.
It's leading up to another question here. In case of a serious earthquake, where we do have quite a few water main breaks, are they readily available, or are they coming from a long distance?
No, the goal is that they'd be readily available. And obviously that was one of the considerations in developing these contracts and providing this resource to the district, is it would provide us at least 2 contractors that are already under contract that we could call and have them, respond as soon as possible with whatever resources they have and that we needed.
Mm-hmm. What outside resources are we leveraging at the current time?
And we do have contracts for various support services. That could be welding, which was already approved today. We use paving services. We often have contracts with vac companies when we need their vac truck. We do have 1 truck, but we do have other resources that we can call in. So we currently have like various specialty services that we use. But for when it comes to large construction companies, we've been in need of this service for a while. So it's taken some time to get this put together and out on the street. So this is kind of filling that general construction contractor support role. If you recall, we've had to do change orders through like the main renewal project to use that contractor to make repairs. So this will hopefully provide a resource directly to operations and specifically distribution maintenance to be able to call in for any specific needs or support services.
Mm-hmm. So this is the first time we are entering into these type of contracts with these type of companies. Is that correct?
That I don't know. Prior to my arrival, historically, we've had these resources available. I'll defer to Mr. Stevens or Mr. Shaver on the history, but since I've gotten here, no, we've been in need of this type of support for the district.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, we have used sort of time and expense contracts before, but really in response to specific issues. Like, for example, the El Nino year, we had lots of sort of flood damage at various facilities. And to expedite repairs, we paid contractors at basically the Caltrans rate for various work that was needed at different facilities. But that was kind of an after the fact rush thing. The district has been striving to provide these, to sort of line up these kind of services so that they're available when needed, especially, you know, for an unanticipated emergency where we may have our own forces be sort of overwhelmed by the events. And then for specialized work. And I really do want to emphasize what Mr. Wren said, and that is this is not intended to replace existing staff in any shape, form whatsoever. This is intended to be utilized sparingly for the emergency services and for the specialized services. It's consistent with what we already do, but hopefully it will be more efficient and effective.
Any other questions or comments from directors? If not, let me open it up to members of the public for any questions or comments on this item. Hearing none, is there a motion on the table?
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Great.
Okay, Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Item 5.21, implementation of district-wide 2021 classification and compensation study for unrepresented management confidential professional staff. And I'll turn it to Mr. Shaver.
Thank you, President Akbari. This is sort of a generational item. The district has not done classification and compensation implementation of this scale, at least during my tenure. So I'm very grateful for Ms. Salito, our Human Resources and Risk Manager, who has taken the lead on this item and has been assisted by many staff in all departments to bring this to the finish line to you today. So I turn it over to Ms. Salito.
Good evening, Board of Directors. Item 5.21 seeks board approval to implement the 2021 district-wide classification and compensation study for all unrepresented management, confidential, and professional staff, or as we call them, MCP positions. Implementation of the study for represented positions is subject to bargaining, and the district is currently in negotiations with both employee union groups regarding implementation. As such, tonight's discussion will focus only on those unrepresented MCP positions. The study itself was conducted by Ralph Anderson and Associates and was initiated in February of 2020. The item outlines the main goals of the study, but in a very short summary, the study includes 2 phases and 2 reports. The classification report, which was a review of all current district classifications and updating the job descriptions to reflect current job functions and requirements. In some cases, this resulted in creating new classifications or amending and consolidating others. The second part, the compensation report, included a total compensation survey of all comparable agencies for all district journey level and single class positions. This portion also included a review and update of the agencies that the district uses as comparable agencies. District staff recommends that both the classification and compensation report recommendations be implemented. Regarding compensation, the district is currently at approximately the 78th percentile of the aggregate of all comparable compensation data. In order to maintain market position and continue to attract and retain top talent towards maximizing operational impact and efficiency, the study recommends all classifications be adjusted to reach the 75th percentile of market. For staff in positions that are characterized as overmarket and would result in salary reductions, in order to minimize the negative impact to current district staff, it is recommended that salaries for those staff be maintained and frozen at their current range. And new staff hired after July 1st, 2021 would be hired into the new adjusted salary ranges that match the market position. Following this, in order to preserve the district's interest in attaining the 75th percentile market position, it is recommended that there be no cost of living adjustment, COLA, for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. Instead, it is recommended that market adjustments be implemented according to the study, and that for staff that receive less than a 2% market adjustment increase, or for those that are frozen, those staff receive up to a maximum of a total 2% lump sum equivalent payment. While the implementation of the compensation study will help the district to better align with the desired and more sustainable market position, the implementation of the study for MCP positions does have costs, approximately $509,882 for fiscal year 21-22. In order to help offset a portion of this cost, as well as achieve a more sustainable health benefits program, staff recommends amending the health benefits program for unrepresented employees. Specifically, it is recommended that the flex dollars received through the district's cafeteria plan be capped at 75% of the dual health benefit. The dual health benefit is available to employees who waive district provided coverage if they have health coverage through other means. This amendment would incentivize employees to waive district coverage if they have access to health coverage elsewhere. The savings resulting from this change is estimated to be approximately $228,987 per year. So to conclude, staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to take all actions required to implement the study for all MCP classifications and amend the MCP compensation schedule handbook to amend the health benefits program as described. The reports were very long. There's a link included in your staff report where you can access them, and the public can access them online through the district's public website. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Salito. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, any questions or comments from members of the public? If not, Mr. Nishimura.
Sorry, I was slow getting to that button. Yes, so I'm glad that the district is taking this step. I think it is a critical step in order to understand the impact of labor costs to the customers. In fact, it is in alignment with recommendation 18-36 from the Alameda County Grand Jury. My question or comment really relates to this item is concerning the unrepresented MCP staff. Clearly, the district has labor costs that are not covered under this, and I would strongly urge the district to expand this methodology to all of its workers so that we as the public and the ratepayers can understand how the district fares with relationship to all of the labor costs compared to the market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nishimura. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? Would staff like to respond to Mr. Nishimura's question?
Sure. I have to be careful about what I say for active negotiations, but I can say that we are in active negotiations with both our represented groups, the Operators Association and our OE3 group, regarding implementing the same study for their positions as well. So once those contracts are reach agreement and the board adopts them, they would be presented in public session like this, and we would explain how and what aspects of the study we are implementing for them.
Thank you,
Thank you
Ms.
very much.
If there are no other questions or comments, I'll turn it back to the board to see if we have a motion.
I'll make the motion to move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Great. Roll call, please.
Okay, Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Item 5.22, consider appointment of a representative to the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority, and I will turn it back to Mr. Shaver.
And I will in turn turn it to our Manager of Water Resources, Ms. Laura Heides.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shaver. So this is a quick item sort of revisited on November 12th, 2020, the board adopted resolution number 20-066, authorizing continued participation in the Delta Conveyance Project and funding for planning activities over the next 2 years. Additionally, the board authorized the general manager to execute the amended and restated joint powers agreement forming the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority, or DCA, which amended the original May 2018 DCA joint powers agreement and updated the governance structure to align with current participation interest in the Delta Conveyance Project. Oops, let's see. On January 14th, 2021, the board approved appointment of Sarah Palmer and Valerie Pryor of Zone 7 Water Agency to serve as director and alternate for joint representation of Class 2 on the DCA board through June 30th, 2021, and authorize the board president to make future appointments to the DCA board. This action was made on the condition that staff return to the board on or before the June 2021 board meeting after considering alternate approaches for future appointments in coordination with Zone 7. Since that time, the general managers and staff have developed a letter of understanding, or LOU, for shared representation on the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority that outlines the intent and process for shared representation, generally having the Class 2 director from one agency and the Class 2 director alternate from the other agency, and alternating between the two agencies every 2 years, and allowing for either district board members or staff to serve on the DCA. In order to maintain continuity, the Zone 7 representative will serve as the Class 2 director for the 2-year term starting July 1, 2021. And the LOU was attached to the staff report for reference. To memorialize this arrangement, staff requests authorization for the general manager to execute the LOU with Zone 7 to confirm the intent and process for future appointments, and to provide input to the board president regarding the appointment of the district representative to serve as the Class 2 director alternate for the 2-year term from July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2023. This proposed methodology is consistent with section 2.2.1.2 of the board rules and code of conduct, which generally gives the board president the authority to appoint board members to serve as the representative of the district to other groups and organizations. Board authorization of this item will help meet the district's strategic plan goal 2.2, protect existing imported water supplies. And I should also note that Zone 7, we have been in discussion with them as well, and understand that Ms. Sarah Palmer is interested in serving as the continuing director position as well. So tonight, our recommendation is to discuss the item and then ultimately by motion, authorize the general manager to execute a letter of understanding for shared representation on the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority with Zone 7 Water Agency. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Heides. Are there any questions from the board on this item and the letter of understanding?
Yes. At one time, it looked like we had 4 representatives for one position that would be trading off and in and out. Is my understanding correct that we be able to determine that in a closed session, both the representative and the alternate would be able to attend and observe the both the regular meetings as well as the closed sessions?
Good question. And from what I understand, we asked that back in January after the previous meeting, and they don't currently do that with the alternates in the closed session, but I don't think there's anything that would preclude the board from deciding to do that.
Okay.
So,
And it's our intention now to have a representative from Zone 7 and one from ACWD on at all going forward. We're not going to have two from the same district.
correct. That's the proposal, that we would have one from each, and then we would trade every 2 years, whether it's the director or the alternate position. That said, the LOU we wrote pretty loose in that it would generally be that, and also that leaves room for alternate arrangements, if that's the direction that both boards desire.
Thank you. It appears to be an improvement over our initial start. So thank you very much for your work.
Any other questions or comments from the board? I think directors.
We have to, we should have a discussion at some point of whether it will be a director or a staff member who would be the representative to this group. And that may not be appropriate for this forum, but hearing today. But I leave it open at this time. It appears we can make an appointment of a board member. If it's a staff member, you probably need a majority of the board to make that appointment.
So I believe between the board rules and the action that the directors took last time in January, you do have license to discuss amongst yourselves whether you want it to be a board or staff, and to give direction to appoint either of those options. We were anticipating that we may have some board interest there, so happy to hear the discussion.
Well, I am currently serving on the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority with the support of our board. So I would like to open it up and see if there's another director that would like to serve concurrently on the Design and Construction Authority.
I would be interested in maybe another year. Right now, I'm a little bit busy at work.
And I'd be open to serving in that capacity if it was appropriate. And I don't know that we have even the greater alternative. If one director can't make it, can another slip in? We're getting making it more complicated. But I would be very pleased to serve at the design construction element for this $16 billion project.
I may not end up giving you the money for it.
Think I got a better chance getting the money from you?
Just kidding you there. I would support Director Weed serving on that board as the alternate the first year to Director Palmer. And then I guess it would flip around the following year, right?
So the idea would be 2 years, and then we could restart, and the board at that point, our board would appoint the director at that point, and then Zone 7 would have the alternate. But that doesn't mean we couldn't appoint the same person for continuity.
It's 2 years running, and Zone 7 will hold the regular seat. We have the alternate, then we can go back and change it. Okay.
Correct.
Great. So I would support Director Weed serving in that capacity if there's board concurrence on that.
Likewise, I would definitely be supportive of appointing Director Weed.
I'd support Director Weed.
Well, technically, I believe that the president of the board is empowered to go ahead and make that appointment from previous board action. So I think the board president is hearing from his colleagues on the board. And then, the action that we need this evening, is basically to go ahead and approve the the letter of understanding that the two general managers would execute on how this duty gets shared by the two agencies.
So is it appropriate for me to make a recommendation that we approve this letter of intent or letter of understanding, memo of understanding
Perfectly appropriate.
for item 522, and thereafter the board president can make an appointment with the input he's received?
Yeah, we don't need that as a board action, the second part. It's just basically authorize the general manager to execute a letter of understanding with Zone 7.
If that's a motion, I second it.
Okay, great. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
and Akbari.
And I will note, I just looked at my calendar. The next Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority meeting is next Thursday, 1:30 to 5 p.m.
Do you know if that's Zoomed or in person?
It's on Zoom right now.
Thank you.
We don't have our finance committee next week. It got canceled, but everyone on the finance committee was asked to attend the Design and Construction Authority meeting, so we stay up to speed.
Great. Moving on to item 6.1, board committee reports. Are there?
President Akbari?
Yes.
I think we're deserving of a break right now.
You're right.
We're 2.5 hours into the process here, and I think a 15-minute break would be really worthwhile.
Absolutely. Why don't we reconvene at 8:35 p.m.? That gives us about 15 minutes.
It's 8:25 on my watch.
Okay. I might have the wrong times. Then 15 minutes from now, 8:40.
Okay, great.
8:22 on the cell phone.
Okay, perfect. It is 8:40 p.m. and the board is reconvening. We are on item 6.1, board committee reports. Are there any questions or comments on any items under 6.1? If not, we will move to item 6.2, operational reports. Are there any questions or comments on any items under 6.2?
The harness report still looks good. Thank you.
Awesome. Mr. Nishimura.
Yeah, I actually I was going to comment on the same topic, which is the hardness report. Now I am glad to see that the district is below 150 on everything, although I am sad to see that the hardness in general is going up. I'm actually also on the previous chart, which is, I guess, is covered under 6.2.3, which is the production report. I noticed that we are still consuming more than predicted amounts of SFPUC water, actual versus forecast, and that the blend ratio is a little over 50-50. I was wondering if that is what is the rationale behind that, and is that greater than expected consumption of SFPUC water anticipated for the rest of the summer?
If I can, this is Mr. Aarons. We do anticipate using more than typical because of our PFAS blending requirements at the blending facility. Now that we're blending for PFAS, we have to use a higher ratio of SFPUC water. So we do anticipate using a little more this year than we typically have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Mr. Ahrens. Any other questions or comments on item 6.2? If not, item 6.3, are there any staff presentations tonight?
No, we have no items to present under item 6.3.
Okay, then we can move to item 6.4 and we'll start with 6.4.1, update on COVID-19 pandemic. I'll turn that to you, Mr. Shaver.
Thank you, Mr. President Akbari, rather. This particular item was really a placeholder, just in case we had any late-breaking COVID news to report. I'm happy to say that we are not aware of any additional infections at the district. And I think most of the issues that we want to review with the board will be covering under item 6.4.2. So unless there are any specific COVID-related questions, I'd be happy to defer to 6.4.2.
I think that's fine. I think we can go to 6.4.2.
Okay.
Opening considerations, customer service counters, and in-person board meetings.
Yeah, at the previous board meeting, the board was interested in reviewing sort of what staff is thinking about in terms of how the district might reopen coming out of the pandemic. So what we're bringing for your review and consideration this evening is sort of our initial ideas as staff of some of the considerations that we should make as we think about all of the issues. It's complex. And to start this, Mr. Stevenson will begin with some remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Shaver. And thanks, Mr. Warren, for putting up the slides. This will be very brief, but we did want to share staff's initial thinking and planning with regard to the district's transition from our current status, with many folks working from home under the various orders and regulations in place related to COVID-19, as we transition into perhaps a new normal over time. But I will say that this is all subject to a lot of uncertainty at the moment. I think you may be aware that some of the rules related to workplace conditions related to COVID have been changing rapidly and changed even as of yesterday. And so it's definitely an evolving process. So just wanted to point out here that what we're going to cover here are some of the key considerations that we're working on with regard to reopening, and then customer accessibility to our building, and then also board meetings and returning to in-person board meetings at such time as we're able to do that. And a key here is that we're interested in any feedback or input from the board with regard to this line of thinking. Mr. Warren, if you could move to the next slide, please. So I won't go through all of this, but these are some of the key considerations that staff is working with in terms of our planning that helps to shape our planning with regard to how we transition from our current work mode. A key here is that we are continuing to stick with the major considerations that we've had all along in the COVID-19 pandemic and how we've handled our operations and how we've handled our facilities to try and ensure that employees remain safe, that we continue to provide services to our customers, and that we are supportive of our employees and their families. So clearly, customer service is a key consideration, and we want to ensure that we're providing high levels of customer service going forward. We continue to do that. Other considerations, the guidance provided by health authorities, health agencies, the state of California, Cal OSHA, which again, those requirements are evolving. And then other considerations are those impacts on our families, our employees' families, which aren't fully understood yet. There's still some uncertainty with regard to how many of the schools will be handling next school year. And so that's a consideration too. And then one of the things that we've always done and that we continue to intend to do is ensure that we're providing our employees with adequate notice before major changes are made so that they can plan. So we anticipate that we'll ultimately transition into a post-pandemic telework process. It's something that we've been piloting for some time. We expect that we'll have some form of telework going forward in the future. But the details of that are currently being worked on right now. And a key consideration also is trying to be sure that we're consistent with what the rest of the water industry is doing in particular. We know that, that we need to stay competitive in the industry and also, do the best that we can to treat our employees right. So next slide, please. So with regard to board meetings, what we're currently working with right now is, as you know, is we've been entirely virtual as authorized by the governor's executive order. Sometime following the general reopening of the state that we'll hear more about next week from the governor's office. We know that governor's executive order, the provision that provides for the ability to hold public meetings in a totally virtual way, that will be rescinded or it'll otherwise become not effective. So the governor's office has recently indicated that there'll be ample notice and that they'll provide some time between when they open the state and when they'll rescind those provisions, such that in-person board meetings with in-person participation by the public would again be required. So staff is currently planning for the reopening of the boardroom. And essentially what our thought process is right now is that we would resume in-person board meetings only at such time as the provisions of that executive order are rescinded. And we don't know right now what the timing of that will be. The notice from the governor's office was pretty vague. There was no timelines involved. But that's what our thinking is currently. And just as a reminder, staff is working to ensure that the boardroom would be configured to provide for virtual participation by the public, even after the flexibility related to holding board meetings totally virtually is gone. So in other words, provide for maximum public participation through virtual participation in addition to in-person participation. Okay, next slide, please. And for this slide relating to our customer counter and the district's lobby here at headquarters, I'll turn it over to our manager of finance, John Wonderlich.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Our customer counter has been closed for almost 15 months now, so I thought it might be worthwhile to just quickly recap the key services provided at the counter. And of course, the main service is the ability to receive in-person payments. The last full year before the pandemic, we received just a little over 20,000 payments at the customer counter. That's probably about 4% of total payments received during the year. And we had seen a steady decline over the years leading up to that, largely attributable to the rollout of our new online bill payment platform. The one big service that our customers have been without right now is the ability to make a cash payment. At present, not at present, but before the pandemic, that was the only place for a cash payment was the customer counter. And generally about a third of the customers that came in to make payments were related to delinquent accounts. Most of the other 2/3 typically were senior citizens in the community, where I would say it was maybe a part of their social routine to come in and pay their bill in person. Many of them may have been on a first name basis with the customer service reps that typically staff the front counter. And then, kind of a secondary but still important role of the front counter, of course, is serving as a district receptionist for all visitors, whether that's job applicants, consultants, customers that are there to see development services or conservation staff. And we do generally need at least 2 people to be in the office to staff the front counter, just to make sure there's coverage for breaks. And depending on the timing, when we do reopen the counter, we may need to develop the appropriate signage and protocols just to make sure we're complying with those Cal OSHA requirements. Next slide. And so, in our staff discussions, we're looking at the front counter as a core customer service that's provided. And so we are looking at reopening it at the same general time as kind of typical employee reofficing. So we're not looking at requiring the customer service representatives to return to the office in advance of other office staff. We are suggesting or currently thinking that the hours could be reduced initially upon reopening to 9 to 4. That will provide some additional flexibility for our customer service program in terms of having dedicated time for training or meetings in the morning from 8 to 9, and then traditionally 4 to 5 in the afternoon is the busiest time for phone coverage. And so that will provide for greater flexibility to provide that maximum phone coverage the last hour of the day. And reopening, as mentioned before, does provide that option for customers to make cash payments as well as in-person engagement. We have checked around with some other cities and water districts to see what they're doing. Some have reopened, some have not. Those who have reopened have reported a significant reduction in foot traffic. And so we would suggest that we do reevaluate periodically based on how many customers come back, because at this stage, we just are not really sure how many customers have maybe permanently adjusted their habits, in regards to paying their water bill. We did consider a number of other options, as you can see listed there. But ultimately, our current plan is as presented to reopen with the general employee reofficing. All right, next slide.
So those key 2 items that we wanted to share with the board tonight have to do with public meetings in person in the boardroom, again, resuming those meetings. And then also, as Mr. Wunderlich described, our thinking with regard to the customer counter in the lobby. The timing of all of this, again, is very uncertain. It has a lot to do with Cal OSHA requirements, which are in flux, and what may come out of the governor's reopening plans, and the degree to which the county of Alameda aligns with the state. We expect the county to align well with the state. So there's still a good deal of uncertainty, but as we are conducting this planning, we wanted to share our current thinking with the board and receive any feedback or thoughts that the board might have. So really, this is an opportunity for the board to share any reactions from the information that we've shared this evening. So we'd be happy to take any questions or comments about our thinking currently.
I have a comment, if I might. I would encourage you to have a separate section on what I'll call hybrid meetings, where you have people come, staff or the public coming in, maybe another board member. That we expanded to board committee meetings as well as the board meetings themselves. We've seen extraordinary participation that we have not seen at other agencies and entities such as Aqua when they're able to reach out to a broader community. So that would require rehabbing more than just the boardroom, but possibly some of the conference rooms.
Mr. Stevenson, why don't you go ahead to John and come back to me?
Yeah, so certainly we're working to make sure that the boardroom itself is compatible with that hybrid approach. And right now we think we'll have that available at the time that we return to the boardroom. In terms of other meeting spaces and so forth, we are thinking about what would be needed from a technology standpoint and so forth. And so that is definitely part of the thinking right now, but we definitely wanted to take care of the boardroom first.
And I would suggest that it gives you the ability to bring in people on a Monday or Friday who might not be in the building and get them to participate. But there's extraordinary opportunities with the technology as we expand it through the operation.
Yeah, I will say that factoring into our thinking overall with regard to what the new normal looks like is leveraging those advantages that that we've seen from this past year and a couple of months. There are some advantages. Certainly the technology has proven itself and has actually improved a great deal over this last year. And we definitely want to leverage that. So yeah, that's part of the thinking.
And also in customer services, the ability to have visual contact remotely between the service counter and individuals at their home or in their vehicles on their cell phone is something we should hopefully continue to explore. Thank
you. Mr. Stevenson, I don't have any comments on the presentation. I guess you just have to use your best judgment on when you start to resume activities at the district. But I do want to make this comment. I don't hear this from any other speaker, but when you speak, there's this low tone, obnoxious noise in the background. It's like a drawn out Morse code, but at a very low frequency. And it's really annoying. And I've noticed it in previous meetings too. I don't know what causes that at your end, but I don't hear it from any other speaker.
Thank you. That's the first I've heard of that. I'll have to look into see if I can correct whatever that is.
And it's only when you speak. I want to plug my ears. It's like, somebody scratching on a chalkboard or something.
I'll try and not speak as much.
I don't think that's an option.
Any other board feedback on reopening?
I'll support what I think they got a good plan. I do support some degree of work from home, not necessarily 100%. I would love to see the front desk open. I think there's no reason that we can't. My folks have been working in the field, frontline, transportation through the whole time. We're still here. I've done some work from home during this time, not a whole lot. So I support work from home primarily from, it makes environmental sense. But I also believe the office has a place, a strong place. And I think the front desk has one too. And I look forward to it. And I think Mr. Stevenson will do a fine job in opening back up. I just wish Cal Ocean would do such a fine job. I'm really disappointed with Cal OSHA. I'll just leave it at that. I know the governor's disappointed with him too, so.
President Akbari, if I may.
Yes.
So I am fine with the proposed approach. I guess my curiosity is in what's the current status on our work from home or telecommunication plan, because that has to go hand in hand, dovetail into our reopening plan, right? And both plan, I would assume we need to meet and confer with our representative group if it plays the same way as my own work. So can you just give us a little bit idea as to what is the latest status with our working from home policy, and what is the timing in terms of accompanying this reopening plan?
Great question. And I will say that that's something that we're actively talking through right now. So here's the general concept. We expect that we'll be following Cal OSHA rules. We'll be following the state reopening, and then there'll be some delay as we notify staff and inform everybody as to what the options will be in the future. And then likely we'll have a period where when it's safe to do so, and when we can ensure that we're in compliance with health and safety regulations that will allow folks to return, those folks who are working from home now, and as you know, it's only part of our overall workforce, that will allow folks to come back on a voluntary basis. Once we can confirm they'll be able to work safely. And then later, likely once more is known about in-person instruction and schools reopening and so forth, and what the plans will be there, then there'll be a more general re-officing for all of those work from home staff. But we expect that there'll be some form of hybrid in the future. At that time, we hope to implement some form of hybrid work schedule where some portion of their time they'd continue to be able to work from home, and then other portions of their time they would be working on site. So we are really trying to maximize the benefits of being able to allow folks to work from home, but also ensure that we've got on-site coverage at all times, and that there are opportunities for, you know, in-person meetings and collaboration and so forth going forward. So we're really trying to get the best of both worlds, but we understand it's a challenge to do that. So some form of hybrid over the long term in the future, and you are correct with our represented groups. Before we can implement a change like that, we will need to ensure that we're meeting and conferring. And then ensuring that there's agreement with the overall protocols and guidelines that go along with that work schedule. And again, with regard to timing, that general re-officing probably happens later in the summer, or perhaps after Labor Day in September. But again, all of this is very, from a planning standpoint, that's where our minds are right now, but it's very much dependent on how things develop between now and then.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. And I totally understand that flexibility is required, but I still encourage the staff to work on a policy and get a policy in place. Let's be very frank. There will be people who want to work from home that we don't want them to work from home for one reason or another. And there'll be people who could work from home and is wondering about qualification criteria and expectation. It's always nice to have a policy in place, just so that it's clear for everybody.
Yeah.
So thank you.
That policy is underway now, and I will say we do have the benefit of having a pilot that was in place long before COVID struck, and we had a number of folks that were participating on a voluntary basis in this pilot telework program. And so we've been able to sort of refine our guidelines as a result of that. And so I think we're in a pretty good condition to be able to have clear guidelines that are in the district's best interests overall, including employees and customer needs and so forth going forward. So really a shout out to those folks who were involved in the development of that pilot and implementation of that pilot.
Thank you.
Ed, I have a solution to this obnoxious low frequency sound, which is every time I see your lips move, I just put the volume down to 0.
Is anybody else hearing that sort of sound?
Not in my.
Yeah, actually, I'm picking up something too, I think, a little bit. I mean, maybe not as bad as Paul, but it's like a feedback or something, I think, on the microphone. Maybe the
I think I'm getting the same feedback.
Okay, just double checking. Sounds like we're going to be looking at some audio equipment, because it's not good when a director puts it down to 0, the volume. Okay.
And yeah, hopefully we can all listen to our new GM and not turn it down to 0. On the, just real quick on this item, I'm supportive of the current plan that we have. The only concern that I would have is reopening the customer counter from just 9 to 4, I think would preclude some people who might otherwise make use of the customer counter, especially for paying in cash. So I'd like to see us move back to our normal times, 8 to 5, as quickly as possible. But I understand why we're starting with shorter hours. That's the only thought I have on that.
Let me throw out one quick one. If the criteria, as I understand, is that if any person who shows up without vaccination, the entire group must go into mask. So at our meetings, to the extent that we can require people who do not have vaccinations to communicate via telecom, it'd make our life a lot easier.
Yeah, understood. We'll need to ensure that we know what those new rules are when they come out and work accordingly.
Great. So does staff have the guidance that they need for this item?
Yeah, we really appreciate your feedback, and we'll keep the board informed as to how things are progressing. And we do appreciate your input. Thank you.
Wonderful. We will move on to item 7.1. I think this is a report from Directors Sethi and Director Weed, and then following that, I think Director Sethi has another item to report on.
President Akbari, if I might, I had an impromptu GM report item for this evening.
My apologies. Let's move back to GM reports.
So just very quickly, it's that time of year. I just wanted to give the board a heads up that I'll be sending you all emails this evening with the annual audit confirmation paperwork. And so that's from our auditors. This year, it's coming to you as a fillable PDF form that you're asked to fill out and then sign electronically and return by email directly to the auditor. So again, please do not return it to me. Please return it directly to the auditor, and instructions will be provided in the email I send out. And that was all I had.
Mr. Wunderlich, are the auditors, the previous auditors always met with 2 of the directors personally for a lengthy discussion? Is this auditor continuing the same practice?
Yes, this auditor has continued the same practice. However, I think last year, due to the pandemic, the meetings were done on Zoom instead of in person.
And it's with the members of the Finance Committee, right?
Yeah, typically that's how they've done it.
Thank you.
President Akbari, I just note that Mr. Ken N has his hand raised.
Yes, Mr. Nishimura.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment on the previous item relating to reopening. I do want to thank the board and the district for considering to continue a hybrid mode of public participation. If I recall, in a previous meeting, a director was lamenting the lack of public participation in the district meetings. And if we were to move back to a in-person only meeting, a 6 p.m. Board meeting start is terribly inconvenient for those of us that have to try to make it to the district offices from our places of work, especially through Silicon Valley traffic. And 4 p.m. board workshops are even more difficult. So I do commend the district for taking the steps necessary to make it as easy as possible for public to participate, even after the pandemic guidelines or exemptions are lifted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nishimura.
President Akbari, we kind of moved a little quickly past GM reports. I do have two other quick items.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, I normally I keep up. So I did send a one-way communication to the board regarding the upcoming CDS, California Special Districts Association election. And while this isn't on the agenda, I don't think it's appropriate for the directors to deliberate on the candidates. So I posed the question to the directors that you might want to consider this evening, and that is, are the directors more or less okay with President Akbari voting on behalf of the district, or would you like staff to agendize an item for the July 8th board meeting?
I'm happy with the board president taking care of it.
Same here.
Ditto.
More than happy.
Okay.
I have the information I need. And then the next item very quickly is there is a special board meeting, so it's a reminder scheduled on June 24th. And the intent as of today is to provide an update on the AMI project. So that's just a reminder. If anything changes, we'll let you know. And that's all for GM reports. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I think now we can move on to item 7. I will open it up. Director Sethi and Director Weed, I think, have items.
Yeah, I'll kick it off here if I may, with a little 7.0 first. I want to thank the staff led by Mr. Stevenson for the field trip that Director Wong and I took up to the Avalon tank at the end of May. I've looked at aerial photos of that tank and maps, and you get quite a different perspective when you're right up there and you see the actual grading and why we've had the problem. So, you know, extending back over a decade with the surrounding hillside land. And so it was a very educational field trip. It gave me a whole new perspective and feel for what we're dealing with and why it's costing us another $1 million to make repairs up there. So I just want to thank everybody that helped out with that. And the engineering staff gave some very impressive presentations too.
I'll pass that along. Thanks very much, Director Sethi. And we hopefully, once the COVID pandemic is past us, we can increase the frequency of some field visits to take a better look at some of the work that we're doing.
Thank you again. So on the 7.1, Director Weed and I attended this Water Education Foundation Lower Colorado River tour, which was 3 hours one afternoon, and it was very educational. I found it really good tour. I've been wanting to go on this tour physically with the group in the past, but it's a 3-day tour. But there was a lot to learn, especially although I'm familiar with the river and some of the water issues that we deal with, I wasn't really familiar with the history of all the state and federal agreements that are in place and how this has evolved legally over time. That I found that very, very interesting. Second, PBS just started running last night a 9-hour, 9-part program on the Colorado River. So I watched the first segment last night, and that is also a very beautifully done film, starting with ancient history of the 2,400 miles of the Colorado River. Excellent program. The third thing I wanted to mention is really takeaway, kind of a conclusion, and it's really a sad one. When I went on the 3-day Central Valley tour, I kind of felt the same way, that 80% of our water in the state is being used by agriculture, and yet we've been moving toward more high-value crops, which are export crops. So we're using so much of our in-state water to export crops out of the country. And sorry about my voice here, I'm losing it. And this wasn't the situation, decades back. But as we've gone to these high-value crops, it's export revenue, and if you look at state GDP, agriculture still doesn't make up more than 4 or 5%. And I was especially saddened by what I saw on the Colorado River tour, because we're growing alfalfa, 90% of which is going to the Pacific Rim countries to feed their cattle. We're growing dates, which are being exported 90% around the world. Growing limes, a citrus fruit that is exported outside the country. One crop after another, specialty wheats like Duro wheat. And what's happening is that the water that's being used at the end of the Colorado River, they're using all these fertilizers, and then the drainage goes into the Salton Sea, and the Salton Sea is becoming much saltier than the Pacific Ocean. And it's killing off all the native fish, and then the millions of birds that have used the Salton Sea as part of the Pacific Flyway, they're no longer able to roost there. And so it's an ecological tragedy. And, I think it may come to the point where the state of California has to intervene and buy up acreage and just permanently fallow the acreage in the Imperial Valley there, and set up some desalination plants around the Salton Sea, take out the salt, recycle the water back in as fresh water. Because we have one huge man-made disaster going down there in Southern California. So those are my comments on that. John, I didn't talk to you about what you thought, so I'd like to hear your opinion.
It's always a fascinating trip, and on video it was very convenient. I picked up some things. Places I'd been, I didn't realize. Gene Camp, really appreciate the full connection that had to the Los Angeles Aqueduct coming off from Colorado. They had visited the Salton Sea and had reinforced some of those issues. And in Arizona, where they are actually legally overdrafting, the argument is made that they're exporting water by shipping the alfalfa to Saudi Arabia from a groundwater overdraft. So well worth the report. Agriculture, as was told, is about 3% of the state's economy and about 3% of the state's workforce. So, and they use up over 40% of the state's water. And water districts like Westland have purchased hundreds of thousands of acres of land, turned it fallow, the water district buying it, so that it could go to the higher value crops with a hardened demand of primarily almonds. So extraordinary. The other note I'd make is that ACWD this evening made the Drudge Report. They picked up on an article on the San Francisco Chronicle, SF Gate, where Santa Clara Valley is declaring a mandatory water rationing and an emergency, and a water emergency. And then down below that is a statement: Alameda County Water District does not have any mandatory requirements, but you can click on a link that they have in the article to learn about conservation and get some conservation tips. So yeah, we're big time now. Thank you. And then on the other was the local governance committee, which Paul Sethi made the presentation. I observed it, and well done, Paul.
Thank you. So I distributed that presentation to the board after I had it, after Patrick was able to review it. And I just want to report back on what happened because there's been some buzz generating going back to the spring aqua meeting where I was lined up to give this presentation. And normally at our local government committee meeting, we have about 15 to 20 people, even on a Zoom call. But this attracted 42 people. We had the executive director there, also Cindy Tuck. We had the president and vice president of Aqua there, and other Aqua staff, and people from a lot of other committees came to join in our committee for this presentation. So I got a lot of positive feedback, and we had about a 15-minute discussion about steps to move forward with. So we've put together a small working group to make proposals and recommendations at the next local government committee meeting to better help, better promote an understanding of this billing mechanism of putting the fixed charge on the property tax bill. And there were a lot of encouraging comments that were coming from other staff and board members of other agencies. Director Avila from Contra Costa Water District said that Contra Costa is seriously looking at going this route over the next 2 to 3 years, especially with the charges that they're going to have to put on their customers for Los Vaqueros Reservoir expansion. The CFO of East Bay Mud has said she's looking at this seriously. And as we are generating a discussion and laying out the legal foundation and the process for doing it, because it is confusing to a lot of people who have not done this before, we're really helping to educate a lot of folks around the industry. So I'll leave you to read the presentation. I don't want to recite it here, and unless there's some questions. And what I'm hoping to do is that when we go to talking about rates and rate structures later this summer and fall, that maybe we can talk a little bit more about this opportunity in our workshops. Are there any quick questions?
So I have a question, Paul. So moving forward with Aqua, you indicated that you might seek some support from staff and council to assist. And I just wanted to make sure that your colleagues on the board are okay with that.
Yeah, that's right. I may need some additional help from Hanson Bridget and from staff.
If I could mention one thing that did come out in the earlier presentation of the Finance Committee, it was suggested that if you have a fixed dollar amount, which is a delinquent bill, that you can use the property tax mechanism to put a lien on someone's property if they don't pay and get full reimbursement for both the consumption as well as the fixed charge if it's delinquent. There's also, current to that elicited a comment by Cindy Tuck, who said that they're expecting to get a $1 billion federal aid package to help California water districts pay for delinquent billings because of the number of people that are not current on their bills. And second, that Aqua is working with Senator Dodd on the economically disadvantaged program. And there's $600 million in that. So, thank you.
And you know, Pam Tobin, who's the vice president of Aqua, was on this committee with me 4 years ago when I first brought this issue up for discussion purposes, and she was very much opposed. She was adamantly opposed to doing anything like this. And the funny thing to see over the 4-year period now that she's learning more about this, she's now become my biggest cheerleader and champion. And so as we were talking about how to move forward, she was putting in the chat room to everybody all these recommendations on all these things that we could do to help it, help better promote this. So it's interesting just to watch, along with a few other people, that it takes time to educate your own water community, and to see the number of people that have turned around from opposition. Now there's no opposition. And the people that were opposed are now cheerleaders 4 years later. So I'm really excited about this. There's some real momentum building. And, you know, I, as a board member for ACWD, but also being active in 2 Aqua committees, you feel good when you put in the time and effort and you actually see something accomplished. I'll leave it at that. Persistence is my middle name.
Did any directors want to respond?
Director Akbari, I would like to take another short break before we go into closed door.
Sure. I think there's a hand up from a member of the public, Mr. Nishimura.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the last set of exchanges. I understand there's a lot of discussion going on about putting the water bill on the property tax. However, in the last exchange, you know, where it was brought up that, yeah, if you put it on the property tax and the bill goes delinquent, you can use a lien to collect. That bothers me a little bit, right? Because when you fundamentally look at it, water is a basic human necessity, and by, you know, I'm getting the drift from the board that you know, you want to use a property tax mechanism as a strong arm to basically now threaten not only, you know, cutting off water, but also throwing them out of their home for not being able to pay their water bill. And that just seems a little bit heavy-handed to me. And if that is the motivation for the board to be considering this, I'm somewhat disappointed. That's all.
Well, that's not my motivation. And in all of the discussions I've had with the water districts that have implemented, at least putting the fixed charge on the property tax roll, they did extensive community outreach, received a lot of feedback from their communities, and it was positively adopted. It wasn't challenged, you know, with a lot of negativity. And people really liked the aspect of helping out the low-income disadvantaged communities, and in particular renters, because there's so much renter relief here when you put it on the property tax roll.
If I could note, in this mechanism, there's something called the Teeter Plan, which is adopted by 50 of the 58 counties in California. The water district receives full payment from the county. The county then is responsible for the billing and collection. And as with in the same process as the delinquent payment on property taxes, there are numerous protections for the property owner in trying to recover and make the payments necessary to cover their expenses. The fixed cost certainly is a property-related fee, and it is the common practice for sanitary districts to put their bill on the property tax bill. We're merely, in this case, would be replicating what the sanitary districts have done for many years.
So if I may add a couple of pieces of information, the board may be interested in hearing that Dublin San Ramon Services District is considering referral of delinquent charges to the property tax roll starting this year. So they're holding a public hearing on that this month. In fact, I think they had it earlier this month. And in terms of a couple of other comments, staff is actually, in knowing the growing interest in this topic, I've been exchanging emails with the consultant who supports Union Sanitary District with their billing on the property tax roll. And certainly have been learning a few things. And one is my understanding from those discussions is that a homeowner would need to be delinquent for 5 years on their property taxes before they would potentially lose their home. And then a second, because there's been some discussion of the teeter plan, it's at the discretion of the county if you may go on the teeter plan. And so if the county does not authorize you to go on the teeter plan, and I don't think they would authorize that for delinquent collections. I think for service charges perhaps, but probably not for delinquent collections. So if they do not authorize it, then you're not guaranteed 100% collections. Instead, you are paid based on what the county actually collects. And in the future, if there are delinquent payments, you would get a share of those related penalties and interest. But staff is definitely, since we have not heard to the contrary, we are definitely preparing for that August workshop to have a detailed discussion on this topic.
Well, one thing our work group in the local government committee is going to do is we have an extensive list of all the rate consultants that work in California, like Sanjay Agor, and so we're going to give a presentation and hand off materials to all of those people. We're going to be going to the California Council of Cities, or whatever it's called, League of Cities, because this opportunity is not only available to water retailers, but water wholesalers and municipalities that bill for water. And San Jose's having a big discussion right now about, the impact of all the water rate increases from Valley Water. Scotts Valley Water District is also considering this right now. A number of other water districts came forward and said they were also looking at this. So it's a change in thinking, as Dave Egerton said, that we've been doing things a certain way for 100 years, and to get people to change and move in a new direction requires some time and thinking. So we'll see what happens. But, 10 years ago, most water districts were only charging 10–15% on their service charge. Most of it was commodity charge. But as we went through the drought, and and we actually did it preceding the drought, we raised our fixed charge 100% and then another 100%. And many water districts now in the state of California went from 10–15% all the way up to 60–70% on the fixed charge to stabilize their revenues. And so now it makes more sense than ever when you have the preponderance of your bill on the fixed side. Well, put that where it really belongs on the property tax roll, because that is of value to the property, having water and sewer accessibility. And that's the way the county rep from the assessor's office in Napa explained it, that it's having the accessibility that adds value to your property.
This has been a great report on the local government committee, and it sounds like there's going to be a thorough discussion
In
at the
August.
workshop, and I suggest we move on.
Yes.
One quick comment, because I think it's important to the board. It takes a 2/3 vote, so it'll take 4 votes of our board to make a change.
I think this is due to be talked to in August. Thank you.
I have to take a little break.
Yeah, unless there are any other directors' comments or reports, we can move into the closed session. Hearing no other reports, I'll read us into closed session and then we'll adjourn for a break. Item 8.1, pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54956.8, conference with real property negotiators. Property is N3 Cattle Company, consisting of 131 parcels and approximately 50,535 acres in Alameda County, Santa Clara County, San Joaquin County, and Stanislaus County. Assessors' parcel numbers were furnished by the owner's representative and are attached to this agenda. The agency negotiators are Robert Shaver and Ed Stevenson, and the negotiating parties are the N3 Cattle Company, LLC, Wren Jr. and Wren Jr. Trust. Under negotiation are the price and terms of payment. Item 8.2, pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54957, public employee appointment, title General Manager. And item 8.3, pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. The agency designated representatives are Board President Aziz Akbari and Vice President John Weed, and the unrepresented employee is the General Manager. And with that, I will ask our District Secretary to move us into closed session, please.
And just for the public, there is an open session item immediately following these closed sessions. So I just wanted to highlight that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll move everyone to the closed session. Give me one moment, please.
Perfect. It is 11:40.
Okay, now it's good. Okay.
Sorry, was there a question?
I'm sorry, it showed closed session. They showed the appropriate item. It's good.
Yeah, no, thank you for catching that. It is 11:49 p.m. and we are returning to open session. Item 8.1, pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54956.8, conference with real property negotiators. The property is the N3 Cattle Company, consisting of 131 parcels and approximately 50,535 acres in Alameda County, Santa Clara County, San Joaquin County, and Stanislaus County. Assessors' parcel numbers were furnished by the owner's representatives and are attached to the agenda. The agency negotiators are Robert Shaver and Ed Stevenson. The negotiating parties are N3 Cattle Company, LLC, Wren Jr. and Wren Jr. Trust, and under negotiation are the price and terms of payment. Direction was provided to the agency negotiators. Item 8.2, pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54957, public employee appointment, title General Manager, no action was taken. Item 8.3, pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. The agency designated representatives are the Board President Aziz Akbari and Vice President John Weed, and the unrepresented employee is the General Manager. No action was taken on that item. Moving on to item 9.1, consideration and potential action to adopt a resolution approving an employment agreement with Edward Henry Stevenson to serve as the district's general manager. On April 13th, the board appointed Ed Stevenson to the position of general manager of the district contingent upon a successful negotiation of an employment agreement. On April 13th, the board also appointed President Akbari and Vice President Weed as the agency designated representatives for labor negotiations with Mr. Stevenson, an unrepresented employee. The terms and conditions of the employment agreement have been successfully negotiated, and the key business terms of the employment agreement are as follows. Number one, the term. The term of the agreement begins on July 2nd, 2021 and continues until terminated by either party. The general manager is an at-will employee. Item number two, termination limitation. The general manager may not be terminated without cause for a period of 6 months after an ACWD Board of Directors election. Item number three, severance pay. If the board terminates the employment agreement without cause, the district must make a severance pay equal to 6 months base salary and benefits in exchange for a release. Item number four, salary. The district will pay an annual salary of $270,678, which is step 2 of the salary schedule for the general manager classification based on the median of market compensation in the Ralph Anderson compensation and classification study. There are no automatic salary increases. All increases are in the board's sole discretion. Item number 5, IRS 401A plan contribution. The district will make a $10,000 contribution to the general manager's 401A plan during the pay period that includes December 30th, 2021 and annually thereafter, provided that Mr. Stevenson is employed by the district on December 30th of each year. In addition, Mr. Stevenson will receive the district's matching contribution to the plan in accordance with the MCP compensation schedule. Item number 6, automobile. The general manager will receive reimbursement for automobile expenses. And item number 7, other benefits. The general manager will receive the same benefits as provided to management employees. The board may now consider a motion to adopt a resolution approving the employment agreement and authorizing the board president to execute the employment agreement between the district and Edward Henry Stevenson. And with that, I will open it up to the board for a motion on this item.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Congratulations, Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate your deliberations and your, of course, appreciate the thoughts that you put into all this. If I could just make a quick statement, and I will have an objective here of getting us out before midnight so that my first official action is to deprive you of a meeting stipend for Friday. So I just wanted to congratulate Bob in your retirement and thank you for leaving behind a successful, effective, and respected organization. Bob, I think this is one of your many legacies here at ACWD, and you will truly be missed. And then finally, I just wanted the board to know how honored I am that you've put such great trust in me in appointing me to this role. It's a role that I have great respect for since I held my first position here at the district in 1996 and benefited from the district's board's prior appointments going back to Jim Beard and Paul Pirano and Walt Wadlow and now Bob Shaver. My commitment is to truly do the very best I can to advance the objectives of this board, to always be looking forward, and to work with the many really competent, passionate, and just excellent employees here to continue to provide the services that our community relies on us for. So thank you very much. And with that, those are the end of my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I think that concludes our agenda for tonight. So at 11:55, and after a packed meeting tonight with a lot that we got done, I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Aziz. Thank you, everyone. We got
Yes.
it done for midnight. Hey.
Great job, Aziz, on speed reading.
Yeah.
It was impressive.